Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Michael van Eck. Michael van Eck was born on August 14, 1987, in a city that was once a hub for gold miners. He was the only brother to 4 sisters, Natasha, Michelle, Bianca, and Rihanna. Michael grew up in a close-knit family with caring and loving parents who worked hard to provide a decent life for their children. His father was an entrepreneur, and his mother created a nurturing atmosphere at home that encouraged the growth and development of their kids. Michael was a sociable and kind person who did well in school and sports. He even earned a black belt in karate, which gave him confidence and resilience. After completing his education, Michael trained as an electrician, a profession that offered good earnings and promising job prospects. He worked at mine number 4 of the Beatrix mine in the small town of Unison. In 2011, at the age of 23, Michael decided to register on a dating site to distract himself from a recent breakup and meet new people. That's when he came across the profile of a sweet and smiling girl who shared his interests. They both disliked loud parties and wanted to find true love and build a strong family. Michael was pleasantly surprised to have found a suitable match online. On April 2nd, he excitedly told his mother that he had a date and was busy preparing for it. He even withdrew 3,000 rand from his account to impress the girl. However, he was uneasy about the unusual meeting spot his friend had chosen, the city cemetery, and didn't mention it to his parents. At around 9 p.m. that evening, Michael said goodbye to his family and left the house, getting into his silver Peugeot 2007, a gift from his parents for his coming of age. When he arrived at the cemetery, the girl was running a bit late, but she looked stunning in a white dress and greeted him with a smile. They chatted comfortably, and she suggested they head to a more secluded area of the cemetery. There, they found a romantic setup, a blanket and a basket of fruit and wine. After having a glass of wine, the girl suddenly kissed Michael. But the pleasant feeling quickly turned to pain and horror as he realized he had fallen into a sinister trap. Chana van Haren was born in 1991, a time of crisis for her parents. Her mother's pregnancy prompted the couple to put their divorce on hold and try to salvage their relationship. However, their efforts ultimately failed, and their home life continued to deteriorate. Chana's mother made no effort to hide her resentment towards her daughter, viewing her as an unwanted reminder of her husband. After the divorce, Chana's mother took the children and left their father behind. Chana suffered from a severe lack of love and attention from her mother, feeling lonely and misunderstood. Among her siblings, Chana struggled the most, growing increasingly withdrawn and sullen from a young age. She exhibited disturbing behaviors, such as talking about death and creating disturbing drawings. Her grandparents, alarmed by her behavior, suspected supernatural influence and took her to church, where she was subjected to an exorcism ritual. Chana's mental health declined as she got older. At 10, she had a disturbing incident where she threatened a house guest with a knife, prompting her family to seek professional psychiatric help. Fortunately, the medication improved her mood, and her father made an effort to spend quality time with her, even taking her on hunting trips. However, Chana later revealed that she found pleasure in harming animals, often bringing home dead creatures. When Chana turned 12, she formed a problematic friendship with an older man who introduced her to harmful substances and took advantage of her vulnerability. 2 years later, her mother moved to New Zealand, leaving Chana and her siblings in the care of their father and stepmother. At 15, Chana became involved with a 22-year-old man who had an unhealthy interest in Satanism, occultism, and voodoo cults. Fortunately, by her 17th birthday, Chana's life started to take a positive turn. She distanced herself from harmful relationships, successfully graduated from high school, and enrolled in college to study art and graphic design. After abandoning her interest in Satanism and ceasing to use harmful substances, Chana's emotional well-being significantly improved. She excelled in her studies and eventually secured a job in her chosen field. Chana's new job provided her with a supportive community, including her colleagues and management, where she discovered her talent for visual arts, earning her respect and recognition. She also started dating Warren, giving the impression to outsiders, including her family and close friends, that her life was back on track. However, beneath the surface, her inner struggles persisted. Her father was especially relieved, hoping she had finally grown up and would soon get married. But an unexpected obstacle emerged, threatening to disrupt her newfound stability. Warren's friend Roy, who claimed to be highly sensitive, sensed a dark and malevolent presence in Chana, despite her kind and friendly nature. His concerns were dismissed due to the contrast between his perceptions and her outward appearance. One day, Roy approached Chana, asking about Norman, a name that kept appearing in his mind, implying she might be unfaithful to Warren. Chana's response was shocking. She spat in his face and demanded he stop questioning her. Chana's friend, Norman, was later revealed to be the name of her imaginary childhood friend, Zazzle. This discovery changed the dynamics among their group of friends. At a party, Chana became interested in 24-year-old Martin. Martin came from a respected and wealthy family, unlike Chana. He had a good relationship with both his parents and was smart, well-mannered, and performed well in school. However, Martin had been struggling with a mental illness since he was 6 years old. He started having hallucinations, claiming that an entity appeared to him, making him believe he had incredible strength. As Martin grew older, his mental condition worsened, leading to problems at school and home. At 14, he was hospitalized in a psychiatric facility and diagnosed with schizophrenia. Although conventional treatment didn't work, his family and doctors eventually found the right medication to control his condition, except for occasional outbursts of aggression. Chana and Martin, two unstable young individuals, started a romantic relationship. Despite their outward appearance of happiness, their parents were oblivious to the issues the couple had faced in the past. As their relationship progressed, it ultimately led to devastating consequences. At first, the couple was social and outgoing, attending parties and interacting with others. Friends recalled noticing cuts on their hands, which they jokingly attributed to intimate experiments. However, as time passed, Chana and Martin began to withdraw from their social circle and developed an interest in dark practices, including Satanism, voodoo, and occult rituals. This fascination eventually extended to infamous serial killers. In 2011, Martins posted a photo with his girlfriend Chana on social media, captioned "Killers" with an ambiguous emoji. At the time, no one took the post seriously. However, unbeknownst to others, the couple had dark fantasies that eventually turned into a sinister plan. They wanted to torture and kill homeless people, and even practiced on animals. But their plan was put on hold, as they couldn't find a suitable victim. Chana created a profile on a dating site and caught the attention of Michael Van Eck. The couple targeted him for their twisted plan, and Chana suggested they meet in person. Michael agreed, despite the unusual meeting location. Chana and Martins carefully prepared for the date, planning every detail, including what to wear and how to end Michael's life. Chana approached the meeting fully prepared, and the trap was set. Michael fell for the bait, and Martins attacked him from behind with a knife. Despite being stabbed around 30 times, Michael resisted, which caught the attackers off guard. Chana intervened, and together, they overwhelmed Michael, who begged them to end his suffering. After the attack, Martin slit his own throat, and the couple began to dismember Michael's body. They severed his legs and decapitated him, placing the body parts in bags. They buried the body in a shallow grave, but couldn't make it deep enough due to lacking shovels. They then left the scene with the body parts using Michael's car, which they later abandoned in a troubled neighborhood. The next day, a cemetery worker discovered the grave and alerted the authorities. Meanwhile, Michael's parents were frantically searching for him, and his workplace reported him missing. The police found Michael's car, which led them to the cemetery, where they uncovered the gruesome crime scene. The local police were already investigating a mysterious body found on the cemetery grounds, with all signs pointing to foul play. They brought Michael Van Eck's family into the picture, as he had gone missing a day earlier. At the cemetery, Michael's mother identified her son's body by recognizing his personal belongings and distinctive childhood burn scars. The autopsy revealed that Michael had suffered multiple knife wounds and signs of struggle. The body had been dismembered after death, with a level of professional precision suggesting the perpetrators had experience with such acts. The evidence pointed to multiple attackers being involved, given the number and nature of the wounds, as well as the strength required to overpower the victim. DNA testing confirmed the body was 23-year-old Michael Van Eck's. During the investigation, police seized Michael's phone and computer, tracing his last communication to Chav Van Haan, who had invited him to the cemetery on the fateful night. When questioned, Chav and her boyfriend Martin confessed to their involvement in the murder. Chav's father was shocked by her calm and defiant confession, in which she claimed to have dreamed of committing such a crime since she started hunting with him. The lack of remorse from the couple shocked everyone, and they seemed to relish the public attention. They had planned to take their own lives if caught, but later changed their minds, wanting to live the life of monsters. The police search of the couple's apartment revealed a disturbing environment. The walls were covered in distorted portraits of Chav, depicting her without eyes, mouth, or ears in various guises. The police found disturbing evidence in the rooms, including ritual items, animal scalps, knives, and unknown objects. They also discovered the belongings of the murdered him, including his glasses and wallet. Martins later admitted that they took the victim's money to fund their next crime. The most shocking discovery, however, was made in the refrigerator. The police found the victim's head with his mouth sewn shut, which suggested that the couple planned to use it as a ritual bowl. Additionally, the victim's eyes and ears were found in separate containers. The police also found the victim's hand and leg buried near the murderer's home, along with the bodies of several animals. The girl's diary revealed her dark thoughts and plans. The evidence suggested that the couple derived pleasure from taking lives and mutilating bodies. Both Martins and Chana underwent mental evaluations, and the commission confirmed that they were aware of their actions and desired the consequences. In November 2011, Chana stood trial as a serial offender, despite it being a single incident. She openly admitted that she did not feel remorse and desired to repeat her actions. Psychiatrists diagnosed Chana with psychopathic and antisocial disorders, making her a more dangerous individual. Throughout the trial, she remained emotionless. Chana was found guilty and sentenced to 35 years in prison without parole, with 20 years for murder and an additional 15 years for robbery and dismemberment. Martins defended himself in court, claiming that he did not remember the events until he was in jail. He admitted to studying Satanism and occultism, which he believed pushed him and Chana to commit the crime. During the trial, he apologized to the victim's parents, although his apology sounded insincere. He implied that the victim was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, when in reality, the couple had lured him into a premeditated trap. Michael's mother was overcome with grief and struck Martins during one of the sessions. In the end, Martins was also found guilty and sentenced to 35 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving half of his sentence. After 2014, Chana and her lover Martins maintained a relationship through letters while he was in prison. In these letters, Martins referred to Chana as a dark goddess and wrote poetic phrases such as, "When you part your lips, words of a dead butterfly spill out, and they fall upon my mystical heart and paint it with sweet poison." However, over time, Chana ended the relationship, feeling that they had become emotionally disconnected from each other. While in prison, Chana exhibited exemplary behavior, teaching her fellow inmates art and theology. Some collectors, fascinated by notorious criminals, paid large sums for a photograph of Chana with her autograph, as well as a print of her hand. Martins also attracted a following, with a fan club that was monitored by the police for a long time to prevent his followers from emulating his violent actions. Despite his circumstances, Martins continued to receive therapy and completed his education through correspondence courses. Ultimately, the case highlights how two unstable individuals, driven by their desires and lacking boundaries, can destroy an innocent life. Furthermore, it reveals how some people, often hiding behind a seemingly normal facade, can harbor dark and sinister intentions. Unfortunately, new acquaintances can sometimes have a profoundly negative impact on our lives, marking a point of no return. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michelle Anglin. Michelle Lee Cohen Anglin was born on November 27, 1973, in Fountain Valley, California, but soon her family moved to Arizona, where she grew up with her mother Peggy and stepfather Larry McCall. She also had two older sisters, Cindy and Christina. At around 20 years old, Michelle started dating Hudson England, and they gradually fell in love. When Hudson proposed, Michelle accepted without hesitation. In late 1995, the couple got married in the presence of their families and friends, planning a honeymoon and their future together. However, tragedy struck just 4 months after the wedding, changing Michelle's life forever. Michelle's mother, Peggy Cohen McCall, a realtor herself, inspired Michelle to join the industry. According to the Arizona Association of Realtors, there are no mandatory safety measures in place for Arizona realtors. Nevertheless, many builders and agencies provide them with various resources and safety tips to help them stay safe on the job. When Michelle was at the office, her family members, including her husband, sisters, and mother, would typically get in touch with her using her work phone. Whenever she was out showing houses to clients, Michelle would always carry a pager with her so that her family could reach her if needed. However, on February 9, 1996, Michelle failed to respond to her loved one's calls and messages, which was unusual behavior for her. Normally, she would let someone know about her plans to show a house to a potential buyer. The job of a realtor comes with significant risks, often higher than those in other professions. Realtors can be attractive targets for predators because they often work alone and sometimes show properties in remote areas. Experienced realtors are well aware of the dangers associated with this job. Predators may lure them to an isolated location, such as an empty house with no nearby neighbors, under the guise of wanting to buy a property. In reality, they have a different motive. When a realtor finds themselves alone in an empty house with such an individual, the situation can quickly turn bad. To avoid potential risks, realtors are cautioned to maintain a safe distance from clients, stay near the front door, and leave immediately if they sense anything unusual. This is why Michelle's family became worried when they couldn't reach her during the day. Michelle's sister, Cindy, was dating a Phoenix police officer. Concerned about her sister's safety, Cindy asked her boyfriend to perform a welfare check at Michelle's workplace. When he arrived, he found Michelle's car parked outside, but upon inspecting it, he didn't notice anything out of the ordinary and assumed Michelle was working in the office. However, when he entered the office, he was surprised to find no one there. The lights were on, and music was playing, but what he saw next raised concerns. Michelle's purse and pager were left on the table, unlocked, with no signs of struggle or explanation for her sudden departure. That evening, Michelle's family filed an official missing persons report with the police. Earlier that day, Michelle had scheduled a meeting with a potential buyer to show them 3 houses near her office, so she decided not to drive. The police officers who responded to the report inspected Michelle's office and then visited the 3 model homes she may have been showing to the buyer. They performed a preliminary search of each house and found 3 pink buttons in the master closet on the 2nd floor of one of them. They also noticed that 2 candles in the master bathroom had been knocked over, one into each sink. but everything else seemed undisturbed. Cindy's boyfriend got in touch with Cindy to ask if she could describe what Michelle was wearing that day. He wanted to know if the pink buttons found belonged to Michelle's clothes. Unfortunately, Cindy couldn't recall what Michelle had on that day. The officers were convinced that the buttons belonged to a woman due to their color. The police conducted a more thorough search of all 3 houses, focusing especially on the one where the buttons were discovered. Tragically, they found Michelle Anglin's lifeless body under the master bed, which was twisted, severely bruised, and showed signs of a violent struggle. In the closet of the same bedroom, they found traces of seminal fluid, indicating a possible sexual assault. Further investigation revealed broken ceramic candlesticks, pieces of Michelle's clothing, paint, and plaster chips under the bed, as well as in the master bathroom. However, the autopsy revealed no evidence of forced intimacy before Michelle's death. The forensic expert concluded that the perpetrator had attempted to undress Michelle, but she resisted, leading to a violent struggle. Michelle was ultimately strangled, as evidenced by 3 bruises on the left side of her neck and 1 on the right side. According to court documents, a fierce fight took place between Michelle and her attacker in the master closet and bathroom. The master closet contained buttons and seminal fluid, indicating a significant struggle. Additionally, the master bathroom area had damaged candles and candlesticks, while both the bathroom and under the master bed had paint and ceramic chips. These findings demonstrated the extent of the violence. Michelle's clothing was torn and intertwined, suggesting that the perpetrator had forcibly ripped it from her body. She suffered numerous abrasions and bruises on various parts of her body, and her injured hands and wrists indicated that she had been struggling to defend herself. Michelle's mother, Peggy Cohen McCall, reflected on her daughter's tragic death, saying she thinks about her every day. However, instead of remembering the good times, she can only recall the bad times and the fear Michelle must have felt in her final moments. Peggy Cohen McCall was not present to comfort her daughter and alleviate her fears. Following her daughter's death, Peggy Cohen McCall claimed she lost her job due to speaking out about the dangers faced by women working alone at open houses and model homes. The police's first port of call in their investigation was Michelle's husband, Hudson England. This was a routine step, as the police always consider the possibility that a family member might be involved in a crime. Michelle's family didn't think Hudson was capable of taking his wife's life, given that they had been married for just 4 months and seemed happy and in love. However, it's worth noting that a short marriage doesn't rule out the possibility of foul play, as seen in the tragic case of Krista Alexander, who was found dead just 4 months after her wedding. The investigators interviewed Hudson, and he appeared genuinely shaken by Michelle's death. He readily shared his whereabouts and activities on the day of her murder. According to Hudson, he had spent the day visiting car dealerships in search of a family car, as he and Michelle were planning to start a family. The police verified his alibi and found it to be true, which led them to clear him of suspicion. Hudson also told the investigators that he had no idea who might have wanted to harm Michelle, and suspected that she might have been attacked by someone she was showing the house to. The police examined Michelle's mobile phone records, which revealed that on February 9th, she was on a call with a fellow sales agent between 3:45 and 4:15 p.m. During this conversation, Michelle mentioned that she had to end the call because a potential buyer had just arrived at her subdivision. The agent tried to return Michelle's call between 4:30 p.m. and 5 p.m., but received no answer. This information allowed the detectives to narrow down the time frame of Michelle's attack. However, they still needed to identify the identity of the potential buyer she was supposed to show the model homes to. Unfortunately, Michelle did not mention the man's name during her phone conversation with the fellow agent, nor did she record his name in her work notes. The police lacked immediate leads on the mysterious potential buyer due to lack of information. To generate leads, they sought out witnesses, interviewing residents in the area where Michelle was attacked. A local resident, who coincidentally arrived home from work between 4:45 p.m. on February 9th, reported seeing a white man descending the steps of one of the 3 houses for sale. This witness also noticed a black, older model Chevrolet pickup truck with California license plates in the house's parking lot. Additionally, prospective buyers who visited the subdivision between 4 and 4:30 p.m. that day recalled seeing a man walking from the direction of the 2nd and 3rd model homes. They also reported that candlesticks in the 3rd model's master bath had been knocked over into the sinks. The police made a public appeal through the media, seeking any relevant information about the case. They shared details about Michelle England's attack, hoping for clues, and fortunately, this effort was successful. Kim Ramos, a young real estate sales associate, contacted the police on February 9th, the same day Michelle's lifeless body was found. Ramos reported that at around 2 p.m. that day, she had met with a potential buyer who drove an old black Chevrolet pickup truck. The truck caught her attention because it seemed out of place with the $500,000 house the client wanted to buy, suggesting a more modest lifestyle. The client asked Ramos to accompany him to a 2-story house to answer some questions. Although she went with him, she was cautious due to his invasion of her personal space, walking too close and touching her hand several times. She also thought his questions about the tiled floor and the option of a 4th bedroom and den were unconvincing. Ramos asked the client to fill out a guest registration card, which he completed, listing his name as James Adams and providing his home address and phone number. Later, police officers arrived at the address and saw an old black Chevrolet pickup truck with California license plates. Although 32-year-old James Van Adams, the truck's owner, was not home, the police took pictures of the truck and showed them to Ramos. She confirmed that it was the same pickup truck driven by the suspicious client she had met earlier that day, just before Michelle England's death. When investigators looked into James Van Adams's past, they were surprised by what they found. He was married and had a child, but he and his wife were currently going through a separation. Adams had a criminal record, having been convicted in California for a crime he committed in 1990. Melissa Cunningham, a petite 5'4" sales agent weighing 102 pounds, was working alone at a new apartment complex when Adams approached her. He asked her to show him around the model homes that were still under construction. Specifically, he was interested in a 2-story model with a master bedroom and bathroom upstairs. Melissa spent a few minutes with Adams in the upstairs master bedroom and bathroom. As they made their way back down the stairs, Melissa, who was leading the way, heard 2 thuds that sounded like footsteps. She felt a sudden push and fell to the floor below. Adams quickly apologized, claiming he had tripped on a nail, which they both looked for as an explanation for the incident. Adams grabbed Melissa from behind, wrapping one hand around her neck and choking her while twisting her head to the left with his other hand. He threatened to break her neck if she screamed. He then dragged her down the hallway into the kitchen, threw her to the floor, and started tearing off her clothes. Luckily, Melissa managed to escape. She memorized the license plate of Adams' truck and contacted the police. Adams was soon arrested and spent only 2 years in prison for the attack. When investigating Michelle England's death, it didn't take long for detectives to discover Adams' previous failed attack. They obtained a search and arrest warrant, returned to Adams' home, and took him in for questioning. However, he refused to talk and appeared nervous, with injuries under his eye. The detectives suspected that these injuries could have been inflicted by Michelle defending herself with the missing candlesticks, which were later found. They took samples of James's DNA, blood, and hair for further investigation. Kim Ramos, who had met with Adams just a few hours before Michelle's body was found, stated that when she showed him around the house, he didn't have any injuries, bruises, or scratches on his face. However, Adams later claimed that he got hurt while working on his pickup truck. But during the investigation, it was discovered that Adams left work on February 9th at noon and didn't return, citing car troubles. His employer and colleague testified that when they saw him next, he had a facial injury and a black eye that hadn't been there on February 8th or 9th. Initially, the analysis of Adams's DNA, blood, and hair samples excluded him as a contributor, but when the crime lab retested the samples, they got contradictory results, this time including him as a contributor. The Department of Public Safety, DPS, verified the latter result with additional testing. Although the police took extensive fingerprints and footprints at the model home, none of them matched Adams. James Van Adams denied any involvement in the crime. His trial started on July 1st, 1997. Prosecutors presented evidence that implicated Adams in Michelle's death, including testimony from Kim Ramos, who believed she was lucky because Adams had intended to target her before attacking Michelle. Ramos also stated that she didn't believe Adams was genuinely interested in buying a house, citing his clothing, vehicle, and questions about the flooring and fourth bedroom, which she thought were absurd. The state also presented evidence of Adams' interactions with other sales agents on several occasions. In California, several years prior, Adams had interacted with agents. Additionally, months before the attack on Michelle England, he had been in Briarwood, Sientra, and even hours before the attack, he was in contact with other agents. Susan Wright, an employee of Homes by Dave Brown, testified that she had multiple face-to-face meetings with Adams at the Briarwood subdivision and numerous phone conversations with him while working at Briarwood and later at another subdivision. Wright remembered their first meeting in September or October 1995, when Adams asked to view a house for sale. She recalled that Adams stood too close to her, and despite indicating he had questions, didn't ask a single question during the viewing. When other potential buyers arrived, they immediately left and returned to the office. On November 5th, 1995, Adams visited Wright's office again, filling out the guest registration card as Jim Adams. According to Wright, Adams repeatedly visited her office and called her, asking her out on dates each time. It became apparent that James Van Adams exhibited a repetitive pattern of criminal behavior. The victims he attacked in California in 1990, including Michelle England, Susan Wright, Kim Ramos, and Melissa Cunningham, shared similar physical characteristics. Additionally, they all worked alone, and the incidents occurred in the afternoon. In the cases of Melissa Cunningham and Kim Ramos, Adams requested that they accompany him to an upstairs location in a two-story house. The evidence found near Michelle England's body suggested that he made the same request to her as well. Adams's method of attack involved putting his right arm around the victims' necks, as seen in the cases of Michelle England and Melissa Cunningham. In both instances, the attacker removed the victims' clothes and attempted to sexually assault them, indicating that Adams was preparing to commit a crime. Adams targeted potential victims who worked alone and could show him houses for sale without witnesses. The trial process proved to be another ordeal for Michelle's family, who were present in the courtroom. The judge had to remove Michelle's mother, Peggy Cohen McCall, due to her emotional outbursts as she screamed at Adams. However, Adams seemed to take pleasure in seeing Michelle's family suffer and periodically flashed a grin during the trial. On July 14, 1997, the court sentenced Adams to death, despite his claims of innocence throughout the trial. He subsequently exhausted all legal avenues to appeal the verdict, citing the 1990 incident in California, where Melissa Cunningham escaped as evidence that he didn't intend to kill Michelle England. Adams argued that, given this previous incident, the jury should have concluded he was guilty of premeditated second-degree murder, not first-degree murder. Ultimately, all his appeals failed. Adams was found dead in his prison cell on March 14, 2005, and attempts to resuscitate him were unsuccessful. The cause of death was asphyxia, which he had inflicted upon himself. Upon hearing the news, Michelle's family, including her mother Peggy, were overjoyed, with Peggy describing it as a good day to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Abril Perez. Abril Perez was born on November 18, 1971, in Monterrey, Mexico. She was the second of 3 children to parents Maria del Sacramento Saganon and Manuel Perez. Raised alongside her older brother Javier and younger sister Ana, the family lived modestly, but provided their children with a good education and motivated them to aspire to a better life. Abril excelled in school, showed a talent for mathematics and entrepreneurial skills, and dreamed of obtaining a high-quality higher education to secure a well-paying job with career advancement opportunities. After finishing high school, Abril was admitted to the most prestigious university in Nuevo León, where she earned a master's degree in finance and business administration. Upon graduating, she was hired in the sales department of one of the country's largest and fastest-growing companies. A few years later, she ventured into digital sales and quickly rose through the ranks, becoming the executive director of the company within 2 years. Abril was young, beautiful, successful, ambitious, and steadily advancing towards the life she had always dreamed of. She built a brilliant career, supported her family, and was full of plans for the future. However, her personal life remained unsettled, which disappointed her loved ones. Nevertheless, she was confident she would find true love and live a long, happy life. Little did Abril know how her marriage to the perfect man would turn out. Abril met Juan Carlos in the mid-1990s, when her career was taking off. They were both ambitious, which created a strong connection between them. He was captivated by her beauty, charm, kindness, and intelligence, while she was drawn to his sharp intellect and determination. As their companies collaborated on projects, they crossed paths several times, eventually leading Juan Carlos to realize he was in love with Abril. Through mutual acquaintances, he obtained her phone number and asked her out on a date. The feelings were mutual, and their relationship developed quickly. By 1998, they decided to formalize their relationship with a wedding. By then, they had both achieved considerable career success and were involved in developing online stores, which showed great promise. Their life resembled a true fairy tale, evoking envy and admiration among their peers. After 3 years of marriage, Abril gave birth to their first child, a daughter named Ana Cecilia. 2 years later, they had a son named Juan Carlos Jr., and another 2 years after that, they welcomed a third child, a boy named Julio Andreas. Despite having 3 young children, Abril managed to balance her parental responsibilities with her career advancement, barely taking any maternity leave. From the outside, the Perez Sanchez family seemed perfect, wealthy, successful, and happy. However, appearances were deceiving. Behind closed doors, Juan Carlos showed his true nature, being hot-tempered, aggressive, and harsh. He was intolerant of compromise, insisting that everything had to be exactly as he wanted. Over time, his behavior worsened, and verbal altercations escalated into physical confrontations. After the birth of their first daughter, Juan Carlos briefly softened, trying to control his emotions, but it didn't last long. By the time the third child was born, he no longer even tried to be a good father or husband. He would vent his anger on Abril, insulting and belittling her, and her tears seemed to lift his spirits. He regularly physically harmed her, often in ways that left no visible marks on her body, so she could hide the bruises under clothing or mask them with makeup. All this was done to protect his flawless reputation and pride himself on being a model family man, loving husband and father. Abril kept silent for years, trying not to tell even her sister and mother about the ongoing nightmare. She earned well and could have raised the children on her own, but her husband was a wealthy and influential man who could easily take the children away from her through the courts. By 2010, the ideal family facade had begun to crumble, and those who once admired them started to suspect that something was terribly wrong behind closed doors. Abril was not just subdued, but deeply distressed, visibly thin, sleeping poorly, and frequently sporting bruises on her face and body that became increasingly difficult to conceal. In public, Juan Carlos maintained a calm and confident demeanor, pretending that nothing was amiss, playing the role of a loving and caring husband, interacting with his wife politely and affectionately. However, at home, he transformed into a monster, making it increasingly dangerous for Abril to be near him. Despite pleas from loved ones to divorce him, Abril stubbornly insisted that everything was fine and that she would handle the problems with her husband herself. In 2014, Juan Carlos's career reached its peak when he became the head of a major trading company, making him one of the most influential people in the field. After this promotion, the family moved to Mexico City, settling in a large house in one of the capital's best neighborhoods. Their children attended an elite private school, and Abril sincerely hoped that the move would positively affect their relationship. Contrary to expectations, the change only made Juan Carlos continue to physically harm and insult his wife, even doing so in front of their children. He began to groundlessly accuse her of infidelity, and whenever she tried to defend herself, he resorted to using his fists. He monitored her phone and emails, forbade her from using social media, and later even hired a private detective to follow her and photograph any men who came near her. Over the next 4 years, Abril tried everything to save her marriage, despite her husband's behavior becoming utterly unbearable. She lived in a never-ending nightmare that outwardly seemed like a happy and successful union, with many even envying her for having a prominent, influential, wealthy, and seemingly caring husband. In 2018, the Sanchez family traveled to Monterrey to celebrate Catholic Christmas with the Perez family. However, Juan Carlos behaved towards his wife as he was accustomed, not shying away from her parents, who were horrified by what they witnessed. At that moment, Abril realized things could not continue this way and informed her husband that she would file for divorce once they returned to Mexico City. Hearing this, Juan Carlos flew into a rage, grabbing her throat and squeezing so tightly that she nearly lost consciousness. Only her mother, Maria del Soro, entering the room and raising the alarm prevented a tragedy. When the family returned to their home in the capital, Abril prepared for divorce, moving from the marital bedroom to a small guest room. However, this did not save her from her tyrannical husband. On the morning of January 4th, while she was still asleep, Juan Carlos entered the bedroom holding a baseball bat, striking her hard on the head and attempting to swing again. Half awake, Abril barely understood what was happening, but managed to slip off the bed just in time, literally saving her own life. She began to scream, and the children ran into the room having heard the noise. The youngest son shielded his mother with his body while the eldest son took the bat from his father. Together, they fled the house and headed to the hospital, where doctors diagnosed Abril with a serious concussion and a deep laceration above her eyebrow, requiring stitches. As soon as his wife and sons left the home, Juan Carlos contacted his lawyer to explain the situation and asked for help in resolving it. He also posted on his social media page, claiming that his wife had betrayed him, was unfaithful, and intended to leave him for another man, taking their children and attempting to take all their jointly acquired assets. Moreover, he claimed that his wife had stolen all the money from their home safe, and that when he tried to stop her, she injured him with a knife in the shoulder. As proof of his innocence, Sanchez shared photos of a bloody knife and stains on the floor, but these were later revealed to be fake. The blood was from Abril's own room, and the knife photo was taken from the internet. Despite this, his friends believed him and shared his story on social media, sparking widespread outrage. Meanwhile, Abril had filed a police report against Sanchez, accusing him of attempting to kill her. After being released from the hospital, she moved out of their home with their sons and was granted temporary custody. Their adult daughter, who was in college, also sided with her mother and condemned her father's behavior. Sanchez was ordered to pay a small amount of alimony to Abril and their sons, but he disagreed with the amount. He faced a potential prison sentence, But as an influential businessman, he was confident he would avoid punishment. Abril returned to her parents' home in Monterrey, where she filed for divorce and began offering online consultations to women in similar situations. She planned to open a center for psychological and legal assistance for victims of domestic violence. 8.5 months after the incident, Sanchez was finally arrested and charged with femicide, bodily harm, and attempted murder. He was jailed for over a month, but managed to appeal the pretrial detention decision and was released. During the trial, crucial evidence, including hospital photographs and medical records, was not presented. The judge deemed the testimonies of Abril and her sons insufficient and released Sanchez, stating that his actions did not pose a direct threat to Abril's life. Abril was shocked and frightened by the verdict, realizing that her ex-husband had used his connections to secure his release. She sent an official letter to the judge expressing fear for her life, but it had no impact. Immediately after being released, Sanchez began legal proceedings against Abril for custody of their sons, forcing her to return to Mexico City for court sessions. Abril arrived in Mexico City with her children on November 25th, fearing for their safety after a court session. As they drove to the airport, a motorcyclist stopped at a traffic light, pulled out a handgun, and fired twice at Abril, who was sitting in the front passenger seat. One bullet grazed their younger son, but none of the children were seriously hurt. Abril was rushed to the hospital, where doctors fought to save her life for over 6 hours. But unfortunately, she died that evening due to severe injuries and significant blood loss. Abril's family, convinced that her ex-husband Juan Carlos was behind the brutal act, urged authorities to arrest him. However, law enforcement stated that without identifying the shooter, it was difficult to discuss motives and couldn't claim that it was a hitman sent by Sanchez. The case was not classified as femicide until further investigation, and Juan Carlos remained free. After Abril's death, her children were placed in the care of their maternal relatives, while their father, Juan Carlos Sanchez, prepared to fight for custody in court. Sanchez's soon-to-be ex-wife's sister wrote an angry social media post blaming him for the incident, but her page was quickly blocked and later deleted. Despite this, the family decided to draw public attention to the case. The attack on Abril, which occurred on a day dedicated to fighting gender-based violence, sparked widespread outrage. People began sharing numerous cases where men had attempted to kill women but were not punished. As a result, the General Prosecutor's Office launched a new investigation into Sanchez and instructed investigators to review the judge's decisions to release him. The judges involved in Sanchez's case were temporarily suspended and later removed from their positions. Mexican politician and women's rights defender Claudia Sheinbaum Parro confirmed that Abril's case had been reclassified as femicide and would be reinvestigated. The judges who had released Sanchez could face consequences for Abril's death if his guilt was proven. Sanchez posted on social media, calling for the perpetrator of his ex-wife's death to be punished to the fullest extent of the law. However, his daughter Ana Cecilia left an angry comment, accusing her father of cruelty and sharing photos of her mother taken in the hospital after Sanchez had attacked her with a bat. Despite the media attention, Sanchez was initially left free under a restraining order, required to check in weekly at a police station. However, after he failed to appear, a warrant for his arrest was issued. He used his resources and connections to flee the country and enter the United States. Mexican authorities contacted Interpol, reporting Sanchez as a fugitive accused of a serious crime, and he was declared wanted worldwide. An investigation was launched to find the hitman who killed Abril. Street camera footage revealed 2 cars following her vehicle as she left the courthouse with her children and lawyer. The motorcyclist who committed the crime was not alone, but received instructions from individuals in the cars. It took investigators several months to identify some of the participants, and 2 suspects were finally arrested on March 5, 2020. Surprisingly, they did not resist arrest and began cooperating with authorities. hoping to reduce their sentences. It was confirmed that Sanchez was the mastermind behind the crime, having paid a substantial sum to 7 individuals involved in the act. The first to be caught were the driver of one of the chase cars and the motorcyclist who fired the fatal shots. Juan Carlos, while in prison, had hired 2 experienced criminals to be his personal bodyguards. After they were released, he rehired them to find people to kill Abril, promising each a large sum of money if they succeeded. Once he had assembled a team, Juan Carlos paid them the promised money and gave them detailed instructions about Abril's route and vehicle. The toughest part was luring Abril to Mexico City, which he achieved by threatening to take her children if she didn't appear in court. Abril showed up in court as planned, but intended to return to Monterrey the same day. Juan Carlos knew this through his connections, but it wasn't until the end of October 2020 that 3 more people involved in the conspiracy were arrested on suspicion of drug distribution. It was later discovered that they were involved in Abril's murder. All the arrested individuals were part of Juan Maldonado's gang, known as Juan Balto, which had protected Sanchez while he was in prison. Maldonado agreed to help kill Abril in exchange for a large reward. He was arrested in November 2020 and began cooperating, confirming that Juan Carlos had hired people to kill Abril. With this new evidence, it was clear that Sanchez was both the client and organizer of the crime. His previous assault on Abril with a bat was reclassified as an attempted murder, leading the court to issue an arrest warrant for him on charges of femicide. By spring 2021, all the participants in the crime had been caught, except for Sanchez, who remained at large. The weapon used in the murder was also found. In total, 9 people from the same criminal group were detained, 7 of whom were directly involved in chasing and shooting Abril. 5 years after Abril's death, Sanchez, the mastermind of the crime, is still on the run, and his whereabouts remain unknown. The person who pulled the trigger was sentenced to 52 years in prison, while 2 others involved in the crime received 50-year sentences each. The other participants are still under investigation, and their fate has yet to be decided. Welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Rhonda Casto. Stephen and Rhonda, both 23, embarked on a hike along the Eagle Creek Trail. Before they started, Rhonda took a photo of Stephen with her cell phone and jokingly texted her mother, saying he might either propose to her or push her off a cliff. The weather was lovely as they continued their walk. However, Stephen later reported that Rhonda's behavior became strange. She asked him what he would do if something happened to her, and if he would care for their daughter. He reassured her that he would. As the weather started to deteriorate, Stephen suggested they head back, but Rhonda did not turn back. Instead, she wrapped a towel around her shoulders and began running down the narrow, slippery path. Stephen alleged that Rhonda lost her footing and fell about 150 feet down the Eagle Creek Trail. After her fall, Stephen claimed he hiked down to the ravine where she landed, but he had no cell service. He tried to call 911 but couldn't get through, so he left her behind, holding her body until he had to leave. Stephen says he hiked to the trailhead, where he finally reached emergency services for help. Later that day, rescuers retrieved Rhonda's body. However, Rhonda's family reported that Stephen showed no emotional response during her memorial service. Stephen disputes this, claiming he was overwhelmed with grief and continuously crying, but often withdraws from others when deeply upset. Following Rhonda's death, Stephen quickly gathered his and his daughter's belongings and relocated to the other side of Oregon to be closer to his own family. This sudden move raised suspicions among Rhonda's family, who began questioning what had transpired between the couple in the moments leading up to Rhonda's death. In 2006, Stephen moved from the United States to China with his young daughter. This bold move marked a fresh start for both of them. Having previously lived in China during his first marriage, Stephen was drawn to the country and its people. He chose to settle in Wuvi, a city about 75 miles outside of Shanghai. Stephen's decision to teach English to Chinese business people proved to be a great opportunity. His daughter, too, quickly adapted to her new life in China, becoming fluent in Mandarin within just 2 months. Both Stephen and his daughter thrived in their new surroundings. During his time in China, Stephen met and fell in love with Landy Yin Yan. Landy formed a strong bond with his daughter, Man, taking on a motherly role that brought them closer together. Stephen was deeply grateful for Landy's influence in his daughter's life. After a year of dating, Stephen proposed to Landy, and she happily accepted. In February 2015, Stephen and his daughter returned to the United States, where the couple planned to get married. Stephen and his fiancée planned to hold 2 wedding ceremonies, one in America and one in China, to include their families and friends from both countries. Stephen and his daughter arrived in the United States a day before his fiancée, flying into San Francisco to catch a connecting flight to Oregon. As they exited the plane, an officer approached Stephen, telling him they needed to detain him due to an issue with his luggage. The police soon arrived, taking Stephen into custody and separating him from his daughter. What Stephen didn't know was that, during his time in China, detectives had been working tirelessly to investigate Rhonda's death. The suspicious circumstances surrounding her fatal fall from Eagle Creek had led them to continue their inquiry, ultimately concluding that Stephen was responsible for her death. Rhonda's mother played a crucial role in keeping the investigation into her daughter's murder open, regularly contacting detectives for updates. Eventually, the police arrested Stephen at an airport for Rhonda's murder and extradited him to Oregon. When questioned, Stephen claimed he thought he was dreaming and hoped to wake up at home in China with his girlfriend Landy. Unfortunately, his nightmare was reality. Initially, Stephen's bail was set at $2 million, and he spent 14 months in jail awaiting trial. However, the judge later reduced his bail to $250,000, which his attorney secured, and Stephen was released with an ankle monitor. Rhonda's family was overjoyed to learn of Stephen's arrest, knowing justice was finally being served. The arrest brought relief and comfort to Rhonda's loved ones, who had been grieving her loss for years. Stephen's attorney then conducted experiments at Eagle Creek Trail, where Rhonda died, to argue in court that her death was an accidental slip rather than a push by Stephen. The Eagle Creek Trail, where Rhonda fell to her death, is one of the most popular hiking spots in the Columbia River Gorge, known for its breathtaking beauty. During Stephen's preliminary hearings, the medical examiner who performed Rhonda's autopsy revealed a crucial piece of evidence. All of Rhonda's injuries were below the waist. This finding was key to Stephen's defense, as it suggested that Rhonda might have taken her own life. The defense team argued that Rhonda's injuries, including her broken pelvis, were consistent with a feet-first fall, rather than a head-over-heels tumble, which would indicate that she was pushed. Additionally, they presented notes from Rhonda's therapy sessions, which showed that she was depressed, but never expressed suicidal thoughts. Rhonda had previously stated that her relationship with Stephen was unloving. The defense team used this, along with her history of depression, to suggest that Rhonda might have intentionally taken her own life. By presenting this evidence, they hoped to discredit the prosecution's claim that Stephen had pushed Rhonda, resulting in the injuries that ultimately led to her death. Stephen made a claim that Rhonda had suffered from depression and had attempted suicide multiple times before they met, but Rhonda's family disputed this and accused Stephen of lying. They suggested that Stephen was trying to shift the blame onto Rhonda for her death, to distract from his own role in her murder. Stephen also stated that Rhonda had struggled with drug addiction since she was 12, claiming that she had experimented with various substances. However, the medical examiner's report only found slight traces of marijuana and the prescription medication Rhonda was taking for anxiety and depression, which she had been experiencing due to postpartum depression. During the preliminary hearings for Rhonda's murder, disturbing evidence came to light, implicating Stephen in her death. It was revealed that Stephen had been in a romantic relationship with Rhonda's 16-year-old sister, Melanie, despite being in his 30s. This discovery raised serious concerns, given the significant age gap between Stephen and the underage Melanie. The prosecution argued that Stephen's inappropriate relationship with Melanie, his girlfriend Rhonda's sister, could have been a motive for Rhonda's murder. Rhonda had discovered her husband's infidelity, leading to tension and a possible reason to kill her. After Stephen was arrested for Rhonda's murder, he was also charged with multiple counts of sexual assault and sodomy related to his relationship with Melanie. Before his murder trial, in 2005, Stephen pleaded guilty to 2 counts of sexual abuse, admitting to having sexual intercourse with Melanie twice. However, he later claimed that he was forced into making this admission and that it was false. Stephen said he only pleaded guilty because it would allow him to fight for custody of his daughter, and he was desperate to get her back. In contrast, the state alleged that the relationship between Stephen and Melanie lasted for over 4 years. Stephen eventually admitted to having a sexual relationship with Melanie, Rhonda's teenage sister. Rhonda sent a text message to her teenage sister Melanie, expressing her negative feelings towards Stephen. In the message, Rhonda called Stephen a piece of garbage and accused him of using Melanie to hurt her. This suggests that Rhonda was aware of Stephen's manipulative behavior, which her mother confirmed. According to Rhonda's mother, Rhonda loved Melanie and wanted to repair their relationship, which had likely been damaged by Stephen's actions. Evidence presented in court revealed that Stephen's relationship with Rhonda was not as perfect as he claimed. Additionally, the court learned of Stephen's disturbing past, including a deviant sexual history. Specifically, it was revealed that only 6 months after the death of his daughter Rhonda's mother, Stephen was arrested and charged with 5 counts of sexual abuse for allegedly touching a 13-year-old girl. Stephen denied the allegations against him, but later confessed to sending inappropriate text messages and a photo to the victim, admitting his actions were wrong and pleading guilty to sexual harassment. In court, evidence presented included photos of Rhonda's bruised back, taken by herself. Rhonda's friend testified that she had overheard arguments between Rhonda and Stephen when they were on the phone. Additionally, Stephen's ex-wife testified that he had previously attempted to harm her. Despite denying the allegations, Stephen was not charged in China. Rhonda's family, however, remains convinced that Stephen was responsible for her death, believing he was motivated by a life insurance policy he had taken out on her, which he had recently increased. Her mother shared her concerns, revealing that Stephen had suffered significant financial losses from day trading the previous year and was struggling financially. Additionally, those who knew Rhonda well can confirm that she adored her 9-month-old daughter, and it's unthinkable that she would have ended her own life by jumping from Eagle Creek in May 2017. Rhonda's family was stunned to learn that the state had reached a settlement with the defense, resulting in Stephen pleading guilty to criminally negligent homicide, a lesser charge than murder. Despite believing that Stephen had murdered Rhonda, the state's case was weak due to a lack of physical evidence proving he had pushed her from the Eagle Creek Trail. Stephen received credit for time served while awaiting trial, but was required to remain on parole for 3 years. After his release, Rhonda's family and friends felt that justice had not been served, believing Stephen should have faced harsher consequences for his actions. At Stephen's sentencing hearing, Rhonda's sister delivered an emotional impact statement, condemning Stephen for destroying their family and causing immense pain and sorrow. Rhonda's mother also spoke, expressing her bewilderment and frustration, saying that Stephen's actions had shattered their family and left them heartbroken. Stephen said he didn't push Rhonda, but took a deal because he was running out of time to regain custody of his daughter. He claimed he was willing to accept the consequences for his actions to protect his child. However, Rhonda's family and friends didn't believe him. In a 2018 interview, Stephen made a shocking claim about Rhonda's death. He said that when he found her on Eagle Creek Trail, she was still alive. The interviewer asked if Stephen had ended Rhonda's life to spare her further suffering. Stephen responded by asking a hypothetical question: if you shoot a suffering fellow soldier to end their pain, is that murder? He suggested that in some cases, such an act could be seen as justified, although still a form of homicide. While Stephen never directly admitted to harming Rhonda, his comments hinted at the possibility of his involvement in her death. Rhonda's mother applied for Social Security survivor benefits in 2017 on behalf of Rhonda's infant daughter. She claimed the child lived with her and promised to use the funds solely for the baby's care. However, the state accused her of fraud, alleging that between 2010 and 2014, the child actually lived with her father, Stephen, not with Rhonda's mother as claimed. The state charged Rhonda's mother with stealing nearly $40,000 in government funds over 5 years. Her defense team argued that she was trying to prevent Stephen from gaining custody of his daughter and accessing a $1 million life insurance policy he had taken out on Rhonda's life. The defense also highlighted Rhonda's mother's struggle with depression, which worsened after Rhonda's death. They claim that she used marijuana to cope with her grief, which impaired her judgment and clouded her thinking. Rhonda's 53-year-old mother was sentenced to a month in a halfway house and 3 years of probation for stealing government funds. She had pleaded guilty to the crime and was also ordered to repay the $39,100 she stole. Rhonda and Stephen's daughter was placed in foster care in October 2015, after the Department of Human Services took custody of her. This happened because Stephen pleaded guilty to sexually abusing a 13-year-old girl, which led an Oregon court to terminate his parental rights. However, Stephen is appealing this decision. Friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Dalia DiPolito. On a sunny afternoon in Bon Beach, Florida, a man named Muhammad visited the local police department with a shocking story. He claimed that a woman, whom he knew only as Delilah, had approached him with an unusual and disturbing request. Muhammad alleged that Delilah had offered to hire him to commit a murder. While his story seemed plausible, Muhammad failed to provide one crucial detail: Delilah's last name. Despite this limitation, the Bon Beach Police Department took Muhammad's claim seriously and launched an investigation. The detectives were tasked with identifying the mysterious Delilah and determining who her husband was. To gather more information, they decided to use Muhammad as bait to set up a meeting with Delilah. They chose a local mobile gas station as the meeting location, given Muhammad's statement that Delilah lived nearby. At the designated meeting spot, the police set up several surveillance vehicles to monitor the encounter, hoping to gather evidence and piece together the puzzle surrounding Delilah's identity and motives. Before the woman arrived, the detectives briefed Muhammad on what to say to her. They secretly fitted him with a wire and recorder, allowing them to listen in on their conversation as it happened. As they continued to monitor the mobile gas station, the detectives focused on the interaction between Muhammad and a woman named Delilah. What surprised them was Delilah's appearance, which didn't fit the typical profile of someone who would want her husband killed. Delilah, an attractive woman wearing a skirt and tank top, got into the car with Muhammad. Muhammad, pretending to be hesitant, asked if it was worth having someone killed. Delilah replied that she couldn't divorce her husband because she feared he would retaliate if she tried to leave him and divide their assets. The woman told Muhammad that after her husband's murder, she intended to create an alibi by going to a different location, such as Boca Raton. Muhammad then asked her if anyone would suspect her of involvement in her husband's death, and she confidently replied that no one would accuse her. The detectives were stunned by the woman's casual tone as she discussed hiring a hitman to kill her husband. As they continued to listen, They were horrified by the woman's nonchalant attitude, which made it seem like she was discussing a routine business deal rather than arranging for someone's murder. At one point, she even showed Muhammad photos of her husband, which further revealed her callous disregard for human life. During the conversation, the woman made a stunning admission to Muhammad, revealing that she planned to pay a hitman to kill her husband. This confession was a crucial breakthrough for the detective, as it confirmed the woman's involvement in soliciting a murder. However, the detective knew that to build a stronger case, they needed to gather more evidence. The woman told Muhammad that she would withdraw $1,000 in cash and hand it over to the hitman later. After discussing the plan with Muhammad, the woman left the mobile gas station and drove home. The detectives followed her to gather information about her address. A records check revealed that the address belonged to Dahlia Doe, not Delilah as they had initially thought. With this new information, the detectives ran a background check on the vehicle Dahlia used to meet Muhammad at the gas station. This allowed them to obtain the registered owner's name, which was her husband, Mike Doe. To their friends, Mike and Dahlia seemed like a loving and happy couple. The two had met when Mike was browsing the internet at work, looking for something to do when he was feeling bored. Mike found a website that offered escort services and decided to hire one. This decision would have a profound impact on his life. When the escort arrived, Mike was immediately drawn to her physical attractiveness. He thought she was exceptionally beautiful, and he felt an undeniable attraction between them. As they spent more time together, they quickly developed a strong connection, effortlessly engaging in friendly conversations over the next few days. Mike and Dahlia's friendship blossomed into a romantic relationship after they spent a weekend together. They quickly realized their feelings for each other went beyond friendship. As a result, they became a committed couple. A few months into their relationship, they stumbled upon an engagement ring store, which led to a conversation about marriage, a topic they had previously discussed. Mike was drawn to the idea of spending his life with Dahlia and decided to purchase a ring, symbolizing his commitment to their future together. Despite their relationship moving quickly, Mike was deeply happy and in love. Before meeting Dahlia, Mike had a troubled past. In 2001, he was sentenced to 2 years in prison in Broward County, Florida, for grand theft, fraud, and false telephone sales. At the time, Mike was struggling with drug addiction and desperation for money, which he later acknowledged was no excuse for his mistakes. Mike served his 2-year sentence and was given 28 years of probation. The court granted Mike a lengthy probation period to give him time to pay back the significant amount of money he owed. However, when Mike returned home, he was unsure of how he would repay the debt. Determined to settle his debt, Mike found a job as a cook at a local restaurant, earning $350 weekly, which was insufficient to make a notable dent in the substantial amount he owed. To improve his financial situation and secure an early release from probation, Mike sought a better-paying job. A friend offered him an office job near his home, allowing him to transition from cooking to email marketing. As Mike and Dahlia started dating, he eventually confided in her about his probation and the limitations it imposed. Mike explained that he required permission to leave the state while on probation. Dahlia, who had a strong desire to travel, expressed her wish to explore the world with Mike. To help Mike become debt-free, Dahlia offered to provide $91,000 if he paid the remaining balance, enabling them to clear the debt and start the life Dahlia had envisioned. Dahlia, a successful real estate agent, was financially stable and able to help her partner Mike pay off his debt and clear his name. Mike consulted his attorney to understand the process, and the attorney advised him to gather the necessary funds to be released from probation. To facilitate the payment, Dahlia and Mike agreed that she would send the money from her Bank of America account to the attorney. Dahlia informed Mike that she had transferred the funds, but when Mike followed up with the attorney, he was told that the payment had not been received. Mike waited a day and then asked Dahlia about the status of the transfer. However, Dahlia insisted that she had sent the money, leaving Mike frustrated and unsure about what was happening. Mike's concern grew, so he contacted his attorney again, only to be told that they still hadn't received anything. Dahlia claimed to have sent the money to the attorney, but couldn't explain the delay. 2 days had passed since the transaction, but the attorney remained without the funds. Mike asked Dahlia for proof of the transaction, needing the receipt to verify the details. However, Dahlia suspected foul play, suggesting the attorney might have stolen the money. She vowed to find the missing sum, while Mike sought to move past the misunderstanding. Meanwhile, a supervisor at the Bon Beach Police Department reached out to Sergeant Whitey Jean for assistance. Sergeant Jean met with a detective working on Dahlia Deo's case. The detective briefed Sergeant Whitey Jean on the case, revealing that Dahlia wanted to hire someone to kill her husband. The detective explained that Dahlia was waiting for a call from the would-be hitman, and asked Sergeant Whitey Jean to pretend to be the hitman and arrange a meeting with her. Sergeant Whitey Jean agreed to help with the investigation and took on the role of the hitman. As the hitman, he contacted Dahlia and demanded a $3,000 advance and the key to her house. The detective had requested the key as part of their plan to make Dahlia believe the murder would happen at her home. However, Dahlia was unhappy about the payment demand and called Muhammad, the informant, to express her concerns. During the call, the detective overheard Dahlia's fears and worried that they might have scared her off. They feared that Dahlia might change her mind and find someone else to commit the crime. On August 3, 2009, Dahlia met with Sergeant Whitey Jean, who was posing as a hitman, in a CVS parking lot. However, Dahlia didn't bring the agreed-upon payment, which led Sergeant Whitey Jean to warn her that if he had to wait until after the murder to get paid, she would need to give him $7,000 in cash up front. Sergeant Whitey Jean explained to Dahlia that he would plan the staged break-in and murder of her husband Mike on Wednesday morning, taking advantage of the recent robberies in the area. He outlined his plan to make it look like a legitimate break-in, shooting Mike twice in the head to make it appear like a robbery gone wrong. Sergeant Whitey Jean also told Dahlia that he would contact her a few days after the murder, as he knew the police would be closely monitoring her activities in the aftermath of the crime. Sergeant Whitey Jean cautioned Dahlia that the delay was essential to avoid raising suspicions and maintaining the operation's secrecy. During their conversation, he gave her multiple opportunities to withdraw from the murder-for-hire plot. However, Dahlia expressed her unwavering commitment, stating she was 5,000% certain about her decision to have her husband killed. Dahlia provided Sergeant Whitey Jean with crucial details, revealing that her husband, Mike, followed a predictable morning routine, walking the dog at a specific time and leaving the house unlocked. This information was vital to the success of the plan. She also told the sergeant that she would create an alibi by going to the gym during the murder, ensuring her absence from the house when the crime would take place. The sergeant instructed Dahlia to arrive at the gym by 6 a.m. and informed her that he would enter her home at 6:30 a.m. After speaking with Dahlia, Sergeant Whitey Jean was taken aback by her extraordinary cruelty, having encountered few individuals in his line of work who exhibited a similar level of ruthlessness. The detective wanted to create a fake crime scene at Dahlia and Mike's home to see how Dahlia would react on the day of the alleged hit. To do this, they needed to know Dahlia's whereabouts. At 5:30 a.m., Dahlia told Mike she was going to the gym, which Mike found unusual since she had never gone that early before. However, he didn't think much of it and continued with his morning routine. The detective kept an eye on Dahlia to make sure she went to the gym and went inside. This confirmed that the plan could move forward. But before setting up the fake crime scene, the detective needed to fill Mike Dio in on what was happening. About 30 minutes after Dahlia left for the gym, loud banging noises were heard at Mike and Dahlia's house, prompting Mike to rush to the door. When he opened it, he was surprised to find several police officers standing there. Confused and worried, Mike asked them what was going on. The detective informed Mike that his wife, Dahlia, had tried to hire a hitman to kill him, but the hitman was actually an undercover cop. The entire situation was a setup to look like a murder-for-hire plot. Mike was in shock when the police told him that his wife had hired someone to kill him. The detectives took him to the police station, leaving his home to be staged as a crime scene with fake police tape and lights. The detectives then called Dahlia, telling her that they needed to question her about an incident involving her husband. When she arrived home, she found her house surrounded by police cars and crime scene tape. The detective told her that her husband had been murdered, and she broke down in tears. However, the detective noticed that Dahlia's reaction seemed unusual, as she didn't produce any tears. The detective began questioning Dahlia about suspects, trying to get her to confess to hiring the hitman. Dahlia claimed that her marriage was fine and that Mike's problems with probation and a stock fraud conviction might have led to his murder. Unbeknownst to her, Mike was watching from another room. The detective then revealed that they knew the truth behind the murder and brought in Sergeant Whitey Jean, who Dahlia claimed she didn't know. The detective arrested Dahlia for solicitation of murder, revealing that the hitman was an undercover cop. Mike was given the chance to confront Dahlia, but she refused to admit her guilt. Dahlia's trial took place on April 26, 2011, where Mike testified against her for 3 days. Her defense argued that the entire plot was a publicity stunt for a reality TV show, but Mike denied any involvement. Mike denied any interest in reality TV shows and claimed he had no involvement in Dahlia's alleged plot to kill him. He also stated he had no knowledge of public relations. After the trial, the jury found Dahlia guilty of solicitation to commit first-degree murder with a firearm, and she was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Mike was relieved by the verdict, but also felt a sense of closure, knowing justice had been served. However, Dahlia's attorneys appealed the conviction, citing a juror's remark about Dahlia poisoning Mike's Starbucks drink, which was not presented as evidence during the trial. The appellate court reversed the conviction, and a second trial was held. Despite the state's confidence in their case, the jury reached a hung verdict, resulting in a mistrial. A third trial was held, and Dahlia was again found guilty, this time receiving a 16-year prison sentence. Dahlia's defense team continued to appeal her conviction, but the Florida Supreme Court and the U.S. Supreme Court declined to review her case. Her attorneys plan to file a motion with a federal judge to review the third trial for constitutional violations, which would be their last chance to secure a new trial. Despite her conviction, Dahlia has become a respected figure in prison, leading a Bible study group and earning praise from fellow inmates. She is separated from her young son, who lives with his grandmother, and deeply misses being with him. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Agnieszka Klavina. Agnieszka Klavina was born on July 8, 1984, in Riga, the capital of Latvia. She was the younger of 2 daughters, with her sister Greta being only a couple of years older. As a result, the 2 sisters were extremely close and friendly. Their parents made every effort to provide their daughters with a good education and support their dreams. Agnieszka developed into a sociable, cheerful, and active individual. She excelled in school, participated in sports, and had many friends. Her future aspirations involved a career in tourism or entertainment, as she loved traveling and organizing leisure activities. With her striking appearance and impressive physique, Agnieszka consistently received attention and compliments from men. From a young age, Agnieszka had numerous admirers vying for her attention. Following her graduation from school, she worked in the service industry while taking language courses and studying tourism management. At the age of 20, Agnieszka relocated from Latvia to the United Kingdom, settling in London. She believed that this move would provide her with greater opportunities to unlock her full potential and showcase her talents. Parents and an older sister were supportive of her decision. After the move, Agnes met Michael Mills, an older man with a good education and a thriving business. He owned a small movie theater and entertainment complex and was considered successful. Agnes and Michael quickly hit it off and began dating. Michael showered Agnes with expensive gifts, and they traveled together, making plans for their future. They were truly in love and happy, and it seemed like a long and prosperous life awaited them. According to those close to Agnes, this was her first true love. She glowed when she was with Michael and dreamed of becoming his wife. In 2014, Agnes was offered a 3-month contract as an administrator at a popular nightclub in Marbella, Spain. Although this meant a temporary move, Agnes didn't want to pass up the opportunity. Michael couldn't leave his job to go with her, but he didn't oppose her signing the contract. For Agnes, it was a chance to gain experience and potentially develop her career in a new field. Marbella is a renowned and appealing resort on the Mediterranean coast, attracting vacationers from worldwide, particularly affluent individuals seeking entertainment and luxury. It's a popular spot for celebrities, athletes, and business moguls. Agnes, being a sociable person, enjoyed working in such a vibrant environment. Before relocating, she visited her family in Latvia and shared the news about her 3-month employment contract. She also announced her plans to marry Michael after returning to England, which delighted her parents and sister. In late May 2014, Agnes moved to Spain with only the essentials, leaving her lover Michael in London. Despite the distance, they maintained daily communication through phone calls and video chats, keeping each other updated on their lives. Agnes Klavina was active on social media, where she shared daily updates about her life through photos, videos, and stories. As a result, she gained a large following of people who were interested in her activities and work. Her posts made it clear that she lived a busy, exciting life and made the most of every day. When her employment contract ended, Agnes decided to extend her stay in Spain for a few more months. It was the start of the peak tourist season in the resort town, and she saw an opportunity to earn a good income. After discussing her plans with her boyfriend, he gave her his support and promised to visit her for a few days. They had been apart for a long time and were eager to see each other. Agnes quickly found a new job as a hostess at an upscale restaurant and renewed her apartment lease. In September, her boyfriend, Michael, visited her as planned. They spent their time together having fun, making plans for their upcoming wedding, and researching honeymoon destinations. However, their time together was short-lived, as Michael returned to London less than a week later. Agnes was left to work in Spain for another month, after which she intended to visit her relatives in Latvia and then join Michael in England. Unfortunately, these plans were not meant to be fulfilled. On September 6th, Agnes went to the Costa del Sol nightclub with her friends. She had told her fiancé about her plans earlier, and he didn't object. At the club, they took pictures and had a good time, with Agnes posting some photos online that night. People who saw her that night remember Agnes wearing a short dress and carrying a small white handbag. As the night ended, Agnes told her friends she wanted to stay a bit longer and would take a taxi home. Her friends weren't worried because Agnes was responsible and hadn't had much to drink. As her friends left, Agnes was talking to a man who had bought her a cocktail. He seemed to be trying to win her over. After that, Agnes disappeared. Despite being in a crowded nightclub, no one saw her leave or knows where she went. The day after Agnes went missing, she failed to show up at work and her phone was turned off. Concerned colleagues and friends alerted the authorities, but the police were slow to act on their missing persons report. As the evening drew in, Michael, Agnes's worried fiancé, contacted her mother, explaining that he had been unable to reach Agnes all day, which was unprecedented. The following day, Agnes's parents and fiancé attempted to file a missing persons report with the Spanish police. However, they were informed that the report would only be considered if it was made in person. Consequently, Agnes's family and Michael flew to Marbella and filed the report 5 days after her disappearance. The investigation began with a search of Agnes's rented apartment. The property appeared as if Agnes had simply stepped out for a short time, with her belongings, including documents, money, and valuable jewelry, still intact. The fridge was stocked with prepared food, and several outfits were laid out on the bed, suggesting that Agnes had chosen what to wear to the club on her last night out. It was clear that Agnes had not returned to her apartment since leaving with her friends. Agnes's phone was switched off, and she stopped posting on social media. She also wasn't responding to any messages. At this point, the police started investigating her disappearance, but a significant amount of time had already passed. Her friends and family created flyers with her picture and distributed them across the city, asking for help in finding her. The media soon picked up the story, and Agnes's disappearance was featured on TV news and the front pages of local newspapers. The investigation advanced after police analyzed CCTV footage from inside and outside the entertainment venue. Although the files had been deleted, specialists were able to recover them. A parking lot exit camera recording showed Agnes being led out of the club around 6 a.m. by a man, apparently against her will. A closer examination of this footage, the last to show Agnes alive, revealed more disturbing details. A man of large build was leading Agnes, gripping her tightly around the waist. Agnes appeared frightened, attempting to break free several times and speaking emotionally. Despite her struggles, the man persisted, eventually forcing her into a Mercedes A63 with tinted windows in the parking lot. At the moment the large man pushed Agnes into the cabin, another man was already inside, while the first man went to the driver's seat. Agnes managed to open the door and tried to escape, but the doorman, standing next to her, intervened. The driver gestured and spoke, and the doorman pushed Agnes back into the car. The driver then handed the doorman something, likely a cash reward. About 6 minutes after Agnes entered the car, her phone was turned off and never turned back on. The vehicle's movement couldn't be tracked due to a lack of CCTV cameras. It became clear that the men in the cabin were the last to contact Agnes. The case was shrouded in secrecy from the start, with investigators signing non-disclosure agreements and information withheld from the press and Agnes's loved ones. 6 months after the incident, Agnes's relatives were shown footage from the club's cameras, which revealed the identities of the 3 men who had last been in contact with Agnes. The large man who forcibly removed her from the club and pushed her into a car was identified as Wesley Capper, the son of a wealthy and influential British millionaire. Also in the car were Craig Porter, a longtime friend of Capper's with no fixed occupation and a history of police attention, and Sean Usman, a dark-skinned doorman. During interrogation, Porter and Usman both claimed they were innocent, stating that Agnes had entered the car voluntarily. Capper's account was that he and a friend had spotted Agnes, a beautiful blonde, at the club and approached her to strike up a conversation. According to Capper, Agnes was already intoxicated, which contradicts the testimony of her friends. However, when offered a drink, she did not refuse. Capper then suggested continuing the party at his luxurious country house, and Agnes allegedly agreed. Agnes reportedly changed her mind about attending a private party at Wesley's house while already in the car. She asked to be dropped off on a dark stretch of road, saying she would take a taxi home. According to the driver, he dropped her off at the requested location, which had no streetlights or CCTV cameras. However, Craig Porter, another passenger, couldn't confirm or deny this account because he was also heavily intoxicated and didn't recall when Agnes was in the car. Craig claimed he fell asleep shortly after leaving the parking lot and didn't notice Agnes's departure. Sean Usman, the doorman, stated that Agnes was drunk but couldn't say if she entered the car voluntarily. He did confirm that when the car stopped, the blonde woman opened the door and almost fell out. Then, at the driver's request, the doorman slammed the car door shut, burning a substantial tip. When questioned, Usman said he didn't believe Agnes was trying to escape by jumping out of the car while it was moving. He thought she might have accidentally opened the door due to intoxication. He also mentioned that Agnes didn't scream or ask for help. However, footage showed Wesley Capper firmly holding Agnes by the waist and wrist, leading her to the car. Wesley claimed Agnes was dizzy, and he was supporting her to prevent her from falling. Later, investigators discovered another suspicious video taken at Soto Grande in southern Spain's Puerta de la Duquesa port. The video, dated September 10th, 4 days after Agnes's disappearance, showed Wesley, Craig, and 2 other men boarding John Capper's luxury yacht. They were carrying a large, heavy-looking suitcase and a rolled-up carpet. When the company returned to Puerta de la Duquesa port a few days later, they had no luggage. After watching the footage, Capper claimed that he and his friends sailed to Ibiza for fun. According to him, the suitcase contained their belongings, and what investigators thought was a carpet was actually bedding. However, he couldn't explain what happened to it afterward. A thorough search of Wesley's yacht and car yielded nothing, as both had been thoroughly cleaned and dry cleaned, eliminating any DNA evidence. Although a long blonde hair was found in a car's trunk, its origin couldn't be determined because the crucial evidence mysteriously disappeared during the investigation. At the trial, the prosecution revealed another peculiar detail. A few hours after Agnes was in the defendant's car, Capper made multiple calls to emergency services but hung up each time without waiting for an answer, as if he was afraid or unsure of his actions. Capper explained that he was drunk and made the calls randomly. The Clavin family's lawyer believed Agnes had been dead for some time, with her body likely on the seabed in the suitcase brought onto the yacht by the suspects. He also thought the case was intentionally delayed, allowing the suspects to eliminate any incriminating evidence. A year and a half after Agnes vanished, Capper, Porter, and Usman were in court, accused of holding her against her will and forcing her into a car. However, due to insufficient evidence, no additional charges could be brought. They were granted bail and discreetly left the courtroom. Agnes's family was understandably outraged, but the judge stood firm. It wasn't until 2019, nearly 5 years after Agnes's disappearance, that the 3 men were retried. They maintained their innocence, claiming Agnes had entered the car voluntarily. The prosecutor requested that the doorman, Usman, be considered an accomplice to the crime because he assisted the defendants in driving the victim, Agnes, away from the scene. This charge carried a potential 5-year prison sentence for Usman. In his defense, Usman delivered a passionate speech, claiming he was being targeted due to his skin color and inability to afford a good lawyer, as he sent all his earnings to support his impoverished family in Africa. In contrast, the lawyers for Capper and Porter argued that their clients were only guilty of convincing Agnes to get into the car, not of forcing her to do so. According to their version of events, Agnes was dropped off on the road at her request and was waiting for a cab to go home. They suggested that, while intoxicated and unable to defend herself, Agnes might have been kidnapped and killed by someone else. The judge's verdict shocked and outraged the family of the missing young woman because none of the defendants received significant punishment. Usman was acquitted of all charges, while Capper received a 2-year sentence for taking advantage of Agnes's intoxication to persuade her to get into his car. Porter was sentenced to 6 months for his role in the incident. However, both men received suspended sentences and did not serve any time in prison. Instead, they paid Agnes's family a compensation of 101,000 sterling, which was seen as a paltry sum. Agnes's family was disappointed with the outcome and appealed the decision. It was later revealed that both defendants had broken the law again while awaiting the court's decision. Capper, who was under the influence of alcohol and drugs, hit and killed a woman with his car and fled the scene. Porter and his friend, also intoxicated, stole a car after assaulting its owner. Despite the severity of these new crimes, Capper was only sentenced to probation thanks to his lawyer's effective defense. He paid a substantial amount in compensation to the family of the woman he killed but remained free. Porter was less fortunate this time and did go to jail. In 2021, nearly 7 years after Agnes's disappearance, the main suspect faced punishment. Wesley had spent years living a self-destructive lifestyle, excessively consuming alcohol and illicit substances, which severely impacted his health. He was hospitalized and, after seeming to recover, suddenly suffered a stroke. Capper passed away on July 26, 2021, at the age of 44. Around this time, Agnes's parents submitted another appeal to the court. However, since the suspect was now deceased, prosecution was no longer possible. Despite the Supreme Court's pending decision in this complex case, an unexpected development occurred 9 years later. Although Agnes Clavina's body was never found, she was presumed dead. Later, her family, including her parents, sister, and fiancé, accepted their lawyer's theory that the perpetrators had disposed of Agnes's body in a suitcase, which was then loaded onto a yacht and discarded at sea, making it impossible to recover. Nevertheless, in the summer of 2023, 9 years after Agnes vanished, the case took a surprising turn. In mid-June, a gardener at the elite Lida Golf Club in Costa del Sol discovered a mysterious object while cleaning near the coast. Upon closer inspection, it was an old, damaged suitcase. The gardener did not open it and instead called the police. Authorities found human remains inside the suitcase, later identified as belonging to a young woman aged 25 to 35 at the time of death. Further investigation revealed that the suitcase had been in the water for around 10 years before washing the shore. Based on this information, police suspected that the remains might belong to Agnes Clavina, who went missing 9 years ago. To confirm this, experts are currently conducting DNA tests to compare Agnes's DNA with the remains found. The investigation is ongoing, and details have not been made public. If the suspicions are confirmed, the case will be reopened, and surviving suspects will face trial. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Stephanie Scott. Stephanie Scott was a 26-year-old kind and intelligent young woman with a passion for education, much like her father, Robert. As a teacher, she enjoyed teaching English and drama at Leeton High School, a job that gave her a great sense of pride and fulfillment. She was known for her enthusiasm, love for learning, and beautiful smile. Stephanie and Aaron's friendship, formed in their youth, blossomed into romance as they entered adulthood. They began dating in 2012 and, after several years of building a life together, decided to take the next step and get married. As the big day, April 11, 2015, was just around the corner, the wedding preparations were well underway. With everything set and almost complete, from catering and decor to travel plans, all they needed to finalize was a dress rehearsal for their special day, dance lessons, and romantic honeymoon arrangements. In early April, Aaron invited Stephanie to a party out of town, but she declined, opting to stay behind and complete some deadline tasks, including preparing lesson plans for her upcoming absence. On Easter Sunday, April 5, 2015, Stephanie went to her school in Leeton, New South Wales, to drop off some homework with a substitute teacher. She parked her car on the street and met a colleague who lived nearby. Together, they opened the school gates and went inside. After locking the gates behind them, Stephanie went to the English department office, where she sent a confirmation email to a bus company about transportation for her wedding guests. After working for a couple more hours, Stephanie felt relieved that she had completed all her tasks. She left the administrative building and headed towards the gates. Meanwhile, Aaron was expecting Stephanie to be away for a few hours, but as the evening approached, he began to worry because he hadn't heard from her. On April 5th, she didn't reply to his messages. When he returned home after 7 p.m., he found that Stephanie was still not there, and her car was missing from the street. At first, Aaron tried to reassure himself that Stephanie might be feeling overwhelmed by the upcoming wedding and her responsibilities as a teacher, and that she just needed some time to herself. Aaron became increasingly concerned as hours passed. As his worry grew, he sent her another text in the morning, then called her family. After Stephanie's disappearance exceeded 24 hours, Aaron reported her missing at the Leyton police station. The police investigation revealed her car was also missing, leading them to speculate she may have been in an accident or stranded while driving away from Leyton High School. To assist in the search, helicopters were deployed and officers were sent to the school. The police investigation was hindered by the limited number of people at the school on Easter Sunday, but this also helped rule out hundreds of suspects. According to the report, Stephanie had deactivated and reactivated the classroom alarm system between 1:30 p.m. and 1:38 p.m. Unfortunately, this was the only concrete detail the police could gather. Attempts to track Stephanie's phone were unsuccessful, as it was turned off. Her bank accounts and social media showed no activity after Saturday, April 4th. A witness who was near Leyton High School on Easter Sunday reported hearing unusual noises around 2 p.m., including rustling and dragging sounds. At the time, the witness saw Stephanie's car parked under a covered walkway, but didn't think much of it. However, the car was later found to be missing. A school employee who was questioned by detectives reported an unusual conversation he had with one of the school's cleaners the day after Stephanie's disappearance. The employee asked the cleaner when he last saw Stephanie, and the cleaner replied that he hadn't seen her on the day she went missing. When questioned about the possibility of Stephanie running away due to wedding stress, Vincent Stanford, the 24-year-old cleaner, responded with a nervous laugh. The witness who observed this interaction also noticed that Vincent had scratches on his face. As a result, the police decided to investigate further and asked Vincent for more information. During the brief conversation with detectives, Vincent explained that he had stopped by the school to empty the trash cans, despite not being scheduled to work that day. He claimed he was in a hurry to buy groceries and only stayed for a short time. Vincent stated that he did not see Stephanie during his visit. He also reported leaving the school around 3 p.m. to go to his usual store. The police investigation took a significant turn when they discovered that the store Vincent claimed to have visited on the specified date was actually closed. This raised suspicions about Vincent's alibi, and investigators decided to question him further. A search of Vincent's home, with his mother's consent, led to the discovery of a key set matching the description of Stephanie Scott's keys. The search of Vincent's home and belongings yielded additional evidence, including several MDF panels in the back seat of his car, which appeared to be stained with blood. Police also noticed tire tracks in front of the house that didn't match Vincent's vehicle. A used condom was found on the ground near the house, with its wrapper discovered in Vincent's bedroom. When questioned about his whereabouts on the day of the murder, Vincent said he was out taking photos. He pointed to a camera in his car as proof, but this explanation only added to the suspicion surrounding him. Detectives obtained permission from Vincent to view the camera. When they turned it on, they saw a disturbing photo of a charred woman's corpse in a wooded area. Vincent attempted to downplay the image, claiming it was a still from a movie he had filmed that he thought was humorous. However, the police quickly realized that the photo was, in fact, a crime scene image of Stephanie Scott. Vincent Stanford, a 24-year-old cleaner at Leyton High School, was immediately taken into custody. A search of Vincent's phone and laptop uncovered disturbing photos, including images of young girls and women he had been stalking. A new witness came forward on April 17th, reporting that they saw a car near a canal on Easter Sunday at around 4 p.m. The witness described a man getting out of the car and throwing something that looked like a laptop into the water before driving away. The police retrieved the laptop from the canal and confirmed that it belonged to Stephanie. Meanwhile, divers searched the New South Wales River area for her body. As the search continued, police thoroughly searched fields and vineyards near where Stephanie's car was found earlier in the week, as well as the canal where the laptop was discovered. In a surprising turn of events, Vincent, who was already in custody, requested to speak with the police. He provided detailed information about the crime, including the location of Stephanie's body. According to Vincent, on the day of the incident, Stephanie was working on a computer in the upstairs teacher's room with her door open. Vincent claimed that he was cleaning the area and needed to take some bins upstairs, which is when he encountered Stephanie. Vincent told detectives that he acted on a sudden urge to kill Stephanie by retrieving a kit containing handcuffs, Viagra, a knife, and cleaning supplies from his home. He had also researched violent crimes online. Upon returning, he found Stephanie preparing to leave and, as she walked by, she smiled and wished him a happy Easter. Vincent then grabbed her and dragged her into a storage room. When questioned about the scratches on his face, Vincent attributed them to Stephanie's microphone and her fingernails as she defended herself. He described grabbing her from behind, covering her mouth and wrapping his arm around her waist, before dragging her to the storage room. Once inside, he slammed the door shut, threw her to the ground, and punched her repeatedly. Vincent stabbed Stephanie to death, motivated by a twisted pleasure in the act rather than hatred. He acknowledged a history of violent thoughts and suspected underlying psychological issues. Afterwards, he calmly returned home to eat and drink, leaving her body in the storage room. Vincent returned to the school and put Stephanie's body in the trunk of her car. He then drove the car to his home and parked it on the street. The next day, Easter Monday, Vincent drove the car to a national park. There, he removed Stephanie's body from the trunk and left it on the ground. He observed that her face was severely bruised and swollen, with a large bruise under her eye. Vincent covered the body with branches and doused it with gasoline. He then used a match to set the body on fire and discarded the match. For a short time, Vincent stayed at the scene, taking several photos of Stephanie's body with his camera. He waited for a few minutes to ensure the fire was burning steadily before leaving. Afterward, he abandoned Stephanie's car on a remote country road and walked back to town. Vincent denied brutally treating Stephanie, despite detectives knowing otherwise. He faced additional charges of severe harm and physical injury. Questioned about photos of the woman partially undressed, Vincent claimed he often removed her clothes, leaving her bra, which he kept as a souvenir. However, Vincent had actually sent the wedding and graduation rings to his twin brother, Marcus, in Adelaide. Marcus sold the stolen items at a jewelry store and destroyed Stephanie's driver's license after taking a photo of it. A 24-year-old man, identified as Marcus, was arrested at his home in the Adelaide Hills at 7 a.m. Marcus worked on a flower farm and was described by colleagues as quiet and reserved, rarely interacting with them outside of work. During the trial, Marcus Stanford was unrepresented by a lawyer. When the judge asked if there were any reasons he should not be sent to Leeton, Marcus responded in a strong Dutch accent that he had never been to Leeton and saw no reason to go. The search for Stephanie eventually came to a tragic end. While Vincent was still confessing to the crime, the police had already discovered Stephanie's body, just one day before her scheduled wedding date. A badly burned female body was found in a national park, approximately 60 miles from Leeton Middle School. A thorough investigation revealed that Stephanie had suffered a brutal attack, receiving 40 blows to the head, which ultimately led to her death. She had also been stabbed in the neck before her body was discarded and set on fire. Photographs found on Vincent's phone were identified as being of Stephanie, leaving no doubt about his guilt. both Vincent and his brother Marcus were brought to trial. Initially, Vincent denied any involvement in the crime. Vincent Stanford was deemed a danger to society after undergoing psychological tests, which indicated he was a potential serial killer. He showed a disturbing lack of emotions and empathy, often reacting to serious situations with laughter and indifference. Further investigation into his past revealed several alarming incidents. Vincent was born in Australia, but his family relocated to the Netherlands when he was 3 years old. They later returned to New South Wales when he was 7. As a child, Vincent exhibited concerning behavior, including fantasizing about committing murder at the age of 12 and nearly strangling his teacher. His classmates described him as a psychopath, and he was eventually sent to a behavioral corrections school due to his violent and disobedient behavior. Vincent would sneak into the women's restroom to secretly observe female students during lunch breaks. His phone contained 2,000 photos of a young girl and a diary documenting his observations, including following her home and recording her schedule. One entry read, "She's home alone at 15:40. Enough time to abduct." The investigation into Stephanie Scott's murder took a surprising turn when her killer's twin brother, Marcus Stanford, was found to be involved. A search of the Stanford home uncovered evidence, including Stephanie's blood on a knife and her bra. Marcus was sentenced to 15 months in prison for selling Stephanie's stolen jewelry and aiding his brother. After his release in October 2016, the Leeton community expressed outrage and made it clear Marcus was not welcome. A petition with over 60 signatures called for an appeal of the court's decision. Marcus briefly returned to Leeton before leaving the area, and his current whereabouts are unknown. Marcus has expressed genuine remorse for his past actions and has acknowledged that his behavior was reckless and regrettable. Since his release, he has made it clear that he intends to avoid trouble and move forward with his life. However, he also wants to maintain his distance from his twin brother, Vincent, and has no interest in rekindling their relationship. Vincent has been sentenced to life in prison for murder and 15 years for aggravated sexual assault, with both sentences effective as of April 8, 2015. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Donald Alban Blom. Donald Blom was born on February 5, 1949, in Minnesota. He had a difficult childhood, experiencing physical abuse from his father from a young age until his teenage years. As a result, Blom developed behavioral problems and began drinking heavily at an early age. These issues continued into his teenage years, and Blom was eventually sent to a reform school in 10th grade, where he frequently skipped classes. The trauma of his violent relationship with his father likely contributed to his behavioral and alcohol problems, which became more pronounced during puberty. Fast forward to May 26, 1999. Caitlin Poirier was working the night shift alone at a convenience store. After midnight, a customer called the police to report that the clerk was missing. When officers arrived, they found the store empty. Reviewing the surveillance footage, they saw a large man grabbing Caitlin by the neck and leading her out of the store around 11:40 p.m. A man wearing jeans, a backwards baseball cap, and a New York Yankees jersey with the number 23 was seen acting suspiciously near a store. Catherine Hannock, an employee at the nearby Subway restaurant, reported seeing the man behaving strangely before Caitlin's store closed. As she drove home, she coincidentally encountered the same man, who was driving a black Ford F-150 pickup truck with an extended cab and white markings on the side. Hannock followed the truck from a distance and saw it circle the maintenance area several times before entering Moose Lake and stopping in a cafe parking lot. She also noted that Caitlin's car was still in the store's parking lot when she left work. Based on Hannock's description and partially recovered surveillance footage, police created a rough sketch of the suspected kidnapper. The suspect had long blonde hair and looked approximately 25 years old. Based on descriptions from 4 witnesses, a composite sketch was created and shared with the public through local TV and newspapers, seeking information about the person. As the search for evidence continued, hundreds of people from throughout the state gathered to help comb the wooded area around the station, hoping to find the missing Katie Poirier. Police used service dogs and helicopters to search for Katie, but their efforts yielded nothing. Her photo was widely circulated in newspapers and on billboards, making her case a high-profile missing persons investigation. Authorities checked the local sex offender facility, which was near the store where Katie disappeared, and confirmed that all inmates were present and accounted for. This information helped rule out the possibility of a kidnapping by a fugitive offender. Police then focused on searching for a vehicle with a specific license plate number, which led them to Donald Blom. However, the truck at his residence was white, not matching the description of the vehicle they were looking for. The official search for Katie ended on June 6, 1999, without any success. Despite the official search ending, many volunteers continued to look for Katie, hoping that someone might have seen something that could lead to her safe return. Investigators were also waiting for the perpetrator to make another mistake, which could help them crack the case. Maps marked searched areas, but Katie remained missing. 2 weeks later, a man called the hotline, reporting co-worker Donald Hutchinson, who matched the composite sketch and had recently stopped driving his black pickup truck, was absent the day after the abduction and got a haircut. An investigation into Katie's disappearance revealed a surprising discovery about Donald Hutchinson. He was actually an alias for Donald Blom, a man who had a hidden black pickup truck in his garage and owned property just 12 miles from the store in Moose Lake where Katie worked. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered Blom's dark past, which included convictions for sex crimes involving the kidnapping of petite young girls, much like Katie. With this new information, detectives quickly obtained a search warrant for Blom's property. Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension agents tracked down Blom to a campground 140 miles outside of Richfield and brought him in for questioning. They also discovered that Blom had purchased the Moose Lake property 2 years prior, and neighbors confirmed he had been a frequent visitor until Katie's abduction. Blom's supervisor at the veterans' home where he worked stated that he had never seen Blom's real name, as he went by the alias Hutchinson, and was unaware of his criminal record. Colleagues described Blom as a loner who kept to himself. After his arrest, Blom initially cooperated with authorities but soon requested an attorney and refused to testify. Meanwhile, authorities conducted searches that yielded several items from Blom's home, but no official statement was made about what they found. Meanwhile, the search party resumed their efforts on the second day with increased enthusiasm. Katie's mother remained hopeful that her daughter was alive. On Donald Blom's property, fragments resembling bone were found in a fire pit's ashes. The fragments were sent to a lab and confirmed to be bone. A tooth was also found and sent to forensic dentist Dr. and Norlander for analysis. She used alternative methods to verify the tooth's origin, as DNA in the pulp would have been destroyed. A filling confirmed it was human and matched those used for Katie. Researchers identified it as a young woman's tooth, making it likely to belong to Katie. Katie Poirier's kidnapper, Blom, was charged with kidnapping and unlawful possession of a firearm, a federal offense due to his prior convictions. He was initially unwilling to consider a plea agreement, but later changed his mind, agreeing to testify on the condition that he be allowed to call home on September 8. During his confession, Blom recounted the events of May 26, 1999, stating that he had gone fishing and then returned to his home in Richfield, only to drive back to his Moose Lake residence. On his way, he stopped at a bar for a beer and saw Katie in a store while she was conducting business. Blom, who did not know Katie, grabbed her and forced her into his pickup truck. He then drove her to his home, where he strangled her to death from behind, a process that took approximately 20 minutes. Blom claimed that he did not commit any other type of assault on Katie. After killing her, he placed her body in a fire pit, gathered wood and paper, and attempted to burn her remains. However, Blom's account of the events was inconsistent with the video camera footage and the evidence found in the burn pit. According to Blom, Katie had asked him several times to let her go, but she did not struggle with him until he began choking her. Blom stated that he managed to kill Katie with his bare hands, but his recollection of the events was unclear and contradictory. Blom's account of burning Katie's remains was not believable. He claimed that he had burned her body to ashes using only wood and paper, but this was not possible. When questioned further, Blom admitted that he didn't know why he had made this claim, as it didn't make sense to him. After the interview, Blom contacted 2 local TV stations to report his confession and asked them to leave his family alone. As part of his plea deal, his wife was returned several confiscated items, including a parcel of land, a home, and the family car. However, Blom's confession caused significant distress for the Poirier family, who had been holding on to hope that Katie was still alive. Blom later recanted his confession, stating that it was false and made under duress. He claimed that the isolation of solitary confinement and the medication he was taking had caused him to hallucinate, leading him to tell the authorities what he thought they wanted to hear. A plea bargain was no longer an option, and both the prosecution and defense teams were getting ready for trial. It's not uncommon for people to falsely confess to a crime, and this can happen in a few ways. One type of false confession occurs when someone gives in to pressure from the police or interrogation and admits to a crime they didn't commit. Another type of false confession can occur when people are led to believe by the police that they have committed a crime, even if they didn't, and eventually they start to believe it themselves. Blom's trial began in June 2000 with a 5-week jury selection. The trial itself lasted another 5 weeks with numerous witnesses, including several crucial ones. Assistant Prosecutor Thomas Perler presented the case, and Blom's brother was an initial witness. He testified that he gave Blom a New York Yankees jersey, contradicting Blom's earlier claim that he never owned such a jersey, raising questions about potential perjury. More testimony came from 2 women who had been kidnapped by Blom in 1983. They bravely testified about the harm he had inflicted upon them, providing the jury with a first-hand account of Blom's capabilities. Notably, the women's appearances at the time of the kidnapping bore a resemblance to Katie's. Forensic experts specializing in dental evidence analyzed the partial tooth and confirmed that it matched Katie's age, gender, in dental records. Doctor and Norlander, who had initially been uncertain whether the object was even a tooth, testified that the tooth belonged to Katie. The defense called its first witness on August 7th. Amy Blom, Blom's wife, testified that her husband was at home the night Katie disappeared. From the stand, Amy explained that she inferred her husband's whereabouts after seeing a news broadcast about Katie's disappearance the next day. The location of the disappearance was near their country house on Moose Lake, 110 miles from their home. Given her husband's prior convictions, Amy assumed he would be a suspect, which is why she later recalled his exact location the night before. Blom arrived home at 9:30 p.m. to find his wife already in bed. The next morning, his spouse was still at home, having gotten up to start the day, and she had already made coffee. Blom's spouse also took the stand to testify about her experience with the police officers who had questioned her. She described how they had bullied her, implying that if she didn't answer their questions the way they wanted her to, they would take her children away. She further stated that the officers called her a liar. Additionally, when asked about a baseball jersey, she denied having seen her husband wear one or receiving one from her son-in-law among the clothes he had given them. As she gave her testimony, Blom became visibly emotional, crying and wiping away tears. On August 10th, Blom testified in his own defense. Under oath, he denied kidnapping Katie Poirier. During his 3-hour testimony, He alternated between speaking and crying, claiming his life was in shambles and that he was ill at the time of the crime. Blom admitted to the investigation that he had committed the crime, but later recanted his confession. He tried to gain sympathy from the jury by portraying himself as the victim, claiming he was under distress due to media pressure and his wife's threat to leave him. Blom changed his alibi, now stating that he was not at Moose Lake on the night of the crime. Instead, he claimed he was asleep at home with his wife, as she had previously stated. He admitted to being at Moose Lake earlier that evening but claimed to have returned home by 10 p.m. before Katie's disappearance. Appearing in court ultimately had no benefit for Donald Blom. Many perceived him as someone trying to dodge responsibility for his actions once again. At the conclusion of the questioning, Blom expressed frustration and made a last-ditch request to the judge, but it was denied. The case was then presented to the jury. Following a lengthy 10-hour deliberation, which included a 3-hour review of the recorded confessions, the jury found Donald Blom guilty of the crime. He received a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jennifer Brown. Jennifer Brown was born in 1979, radiated positivity and warmth, impacting those around her. Her numerous pursuits often left friends and family wondering how she managed it all, but her true passion was being a mother. Despite having to care for Noah, her son, this has not negatively affected her life. Instead, make Jennifer stronger, especially after Noah was diagnosed with autism as a child. As she cared for Noah, Jennifer became his rock and closest friend. They spent countless hours together, sharing joyful moments and supporting each other through life's challenges. Their heartwarming bond evoked feelings of tenderness and admiration from those who knew them. The small town adored this family for their genuine kindness and cheerful nature. Tragedy struck unexpectedly on January 3, 2023, when Jennifer vanished without leaving behind any clues. On January 4, 2023, Antonio Blair Watts Richardson contacted the Limerick Township Police Department, deeply concerned about his close friend Jennifer's disappearance. Although it had been less than 24 hours since he last saw or heard from her, Antonio's anxiety was growing by the minute. Despite numerous attempts, he couldn't reach Jennifer, which was unusual since she was always responsive, especially when it came to her son Noah. Jennifer's family and friends knew her as a devoted mother and caring person, making her sudden disappearance alarming. Antonio's call to the police initiated a lengthy and mysterious investigation. A massive search effort began, involving police officers, family, and friends, all hoping to find clues about Jennifer's disappearance. The main question on everyone's mind was what could have caused Jennifer to leave her son without explanation. At 4 p.m., Officer Stephen Crawford from the Limerick Township Police Department visited the Brown family home to check on the situation. He observed Jennifer's vehicle parked near the porch. Upon entering the house, he found her keys, purse, tablet, and work cell phone still inside. However, Jennifer's personal cell phone was nowhere to be found. When police attempted to track the phone, they discovered it had been turned off at 7 a.m. on January 4th and the signal couldn't be traced after that. The last known location of the phone was near the intersection of Lewis Road and Ridge Pike in Limerick. This discovery marked the first significant lead in the investigation and indicated that something ominous had occurred. As a result, Jennifer was officially reported missing, and the police launched an investigation. Investigators questioned Jennifer's family, friends, and neighbors, but none of them had any information about her disappearance. Her loved ones, including her Aunt Diane Brem and Jennifer's friends Tiffany Barron and Antonio, were adamant that Jennifer would never leave her son behind. As a devoted mother, she would never abandon her child. Despite efforts, no leads were found in Jennifer's disappearance. Her family appealed to the public and a reward was offered for information, but yielded nothing, leaving unanswered questions and growing anxiety. The police investigation started by examining the events of that day, focusing on Jennifer's close friend Antonio, who was the last person to see her alive. On what seemed like an ordinary January day, Jennifer and Antonio spent time in the living room discussing life, future plans, and their children. As their kids often played together, Jennifer asked Antonio to pick up her son Noah from school. Antonio agreed and headed to the school to get Noah. The next day, however, Noah's behavior at school raised concerns among his teachers. They noticed that he had missed 2 doses of his medication, which was unusual given Jennifer's diligent care for her son's condition. She always kept his teachers informed about his health and any issues that arose at school. The school staff became concerned when they couldn't reach Jennifer. Noah told them Jennifer had gone to the grocery store but hadn't returned. She would never leave her son alone at this time. Antonio also tried to contact her but was unsuccessful. Antonio reported her missing to the police. As the investigation continued, no new information about Jennifer's whereabouts emerged. Hope for her return began to fade with each passing day. It seemed she had vanished without a trace and might never be found. However, on January 18th, 2 weeks after her disappearance was reported, 2 warehouse employees in nearby Limmer Township stumbled upon something unusual. They exited the building to grab coffee and stumbled upon what seemed to be a freshly dug hole. Upon closer inspection, they were shocked to find a woman's body buried in a shallow grave. The workers immediately notified the police, who promptly arrived at the scene. The body was identified as Jennifer Brown, who had been missing for 2 weeks. The sheriff informed Jennifer's family that her body had been found partially buried near a warehouse in Rosefort. An autopsy revealed that Jennifer's death was caused by asphyxiation, with 3 broken ribs indicating a violent struggle with her killer. The investigation shifted from a missing person case to a murder case. Police re-interviewed Jennifer's family and friends, but these conversations yielded no new leads. The investigation seemed to be reaching a dead end, with no suspects in sight. However, just when detectives thought they had hit a roadblock, an unexpected lead emerged from an unforeseen source. After Jennifer's disappearance and murder were made public, the police asked anyone with relevant information to come forward. Noah's teacher responded to this request. She remembered an incident that initially seemed insignificant but raised serious concerns after Jennifer's death. The teacher reported that Noah shared an important detail about the day Jennifer disappeared. Noah told his teacher that when Antonio picked him up from the bus stop on January 3rd, he saw his mom's personal cell phone among Antonio's belongings. Noah recognized the phone because the lock screen showed his own childhood photo. This information proved crucial in the investigation into Jennifer's murder. Previously, investigators suspected that Jennifer's killer had taken her phone. Now, Antonio became the main suspect. The police started investigating the relationship between Jennifer and Antonio, uncovering surprising details. Initially, Jennifer and Antonio's friendship appeared strong and enduring. They spent a significant amount of time together, were well acquainted, and their families socialized with one another. However, once the financial dealings between them became known, one that had been concealed behind their seemingly friendly relationship. Antonio owned a restaurant called Bird's Kitchen, which had declined and closed in early 2022. Following this, Antonio sought help from Jennifer in August 2022. To support her friend, Jennifer decided to invest in Antonio's business, helping him reopen Bird's Kitchen in a new location. They signed a contract that required Jennifer to provide regular financial support to sustain the restaurant, making payments approximately every 6 weeks. To rebuild Bird's Kitchen, Jennifer gave Antonio approximately $36,000 from August to January. They agreed she would give him another $99,000. Antonio was supposed to find a new location, pay rent, sign a contract, and reopen the restaurant in January 2023. However, Antonio spent the money on personal needs instead of the business. As a result, the property owners canceled their agreement with him on December 26, 2022, because he failed to meet his financial obligations. This left Antonio in a difficult situation, losing both money and the opportunity to open the restaurant. The police suspected Antonio of committing a crime to save his business due to his desperate situation. Upon investigating Jennifer's iPad, they found 2 unauthorized transfers of $177,000 to Birdie's Kitchen on January 3rd. These transfers were not part of the agreement between Jennifer and Antonio, and they initially failed due to two-factor authentication, which was later disabled. This evidence increasingly implicated Antonio in her murder. Police interviewed the owners of the property where Antonio lived, who had recently terminated his lease. Surprisingly, on January 4th, the same day Antonio reported Jennifer missing, he had met with them, claiming he had the money to sign a new lease. This led investigators to believe that Antonio was likely the killer, but they knew he would not confess easily. They needed concrete evidence to prove his guilt. To gather more information, investigators spoke with Antonio's wife, Tiara Taylor. They asked her about Antonio's whereabouts on the day Jennifer went missing. Tiara told them that Antonio had visited the Brown family at around 1 p.m. on January 3rd and didn't return home until 4:30 a.m. the next morning, when he picked up Noah from the bus stop. She also mentioned that Antonio came home briefly, then left again around 5 p.m. and didn't return until late that night. This timeline became a crucial focus point for further investigation. Further investigation found that Antonio spent the night with his mistress, Tatiana Garrett, and didn't meet her until 8 p.m. This left a 3-hour gap with no alibi. Based on evidence, detectives created a timeline of the murder. According to them, Antonio went to Jennifer's house on January 3rd around 1 p.m. and allegedly killed her while Noah was at school. Antonio then transferred funds from Jennifer's iPad to his account and left to pick up Noah from the bus stop around 4 p.m. Later, he returned to Jennifer's house, dropped off Noah, and went back to dispose of the body. He buried it in a shallow grave in a field near Roseford. Afterwards, he went to Tatiana's house and spent the night. Everything seemed carefully planned, but one mistake led the police to Antonio. The mistake was letting Noah see his mother's cell phone. The police had enough evidence to convict him but investigated further to confirm his guilt. This involved film experts and a trained dog that could detect cadaveric odors indoors. First, the dog was taken to Jennifer's home to familiarize itself with her scent. This was the same location where the crime had occurred, in her kitchen. The police then led the dog to Antonio's car, where it immediately picked up the same scent. This final piece of evidence solidified the detectives' suspicions of Antonio's involvement in the murder. After months of investigation, Antonio was arrested on February 8th and charged with first-degree murder, third-degree murder, and theft. He is currently being held at the Montgomery County Correctional Facility without bail, awaiting a preliminary hearing where he will face the law for his alleged crimes. Jennifer's loved ones were devastated by her death, especially since the killer was someone they trusted. Now that the killer has been brought to justice, the case was finally closed. The boy's observation of the killer's mistake played a crucial role in uncovering the truth and bringing the perpetrator to justice. The tragic events in Limer Township serve as a reminder that even the most meticulously planned crimes will ultimately be solved. Cruel and inhumane acts will not go unpunished, and those responsible will face the law. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, Juan Carlos was an ambitious entrepreneur, born on November 11, 1968. Juan Carlos and Abril discovered they had a lot in common. Both had attended the Monterey Institute of Science and Technology, where Abril studied and Juan Carlos earned his degree with high academic achievement. Juan Carlos had also studied at top U.S. universities, including the University of Pennsylvania and Harvard. With his education and experience, he considered himself a professional entrepreneur in e-commerce and financial technology. Juan and the Brill became inseparable, collaborating on projects and socializing in the same friend circle. As time passed, their friendship blossomed into romance. After a few years of dating, they decided to tie the knot, and their wedding took place in 1994. Their collaboration led to numerous successful projects, including the online stores Pag Mobile and Plascom. They also played a key role in the development of the Dem store, which became a leading e-commerce platform in Mexico. By 1999, their life appeared to be a perfect fairy tale, with both partners achieving great success in their careers and enjoying a happy relationship. Their joy was further amplified with the birth of their first child, Ana Cecilia, in 2001. 2 years later, they welcomed a son, Juan Carlos Jr., followed by another son, Julio Andres, in 2005. Despite their busy schedules, Abril prioritized her children's needs, taking care of them personally and attending their school activities. Abril's devotion earned her the respect and admiration of those around her. Juan Carlos was also a dedicated father, and together they created a seemingly ideal family that many people envied. However, behind the facade, the family was struggling with difficulties, and all members suffered due to Juan's short temper. Juan was a cruel man who frequently lashed out at anyone who crossed his path. His behavior towards his wife, Abril, began with verbal abuse, making her feel uncomfortable and hurt with his insulting words. Over time, the situation worsened, and Juan started using physical violence against Abril, regularly beating her. Abril attempted to conceal the abuse from her friends and family, fearing that she wouldn't be able to provide for their children on her own. She believed that staying with Juan would give their children a better future. However, by 2009, the situation had become so severe that others began to suspect what was happening in the family. Abril has always kept it a secret from her friends and family, but whenever they asked about a possible divorce, she insisted that she wouldn't leave Juan. By 2014, Juan had reached the pinnacle of his career, becoming a prominent figure in Amazon's retail industry in Mexico. A year later, when Juan became the director of Amazon in Mexico, the family had to relocate to Mexico City. Abril hoped that the change of scenery would resolve their problems, but unfortunately, the abuse continued. Juan Carlos presented himself as a loving husband and father to the public, but behind closed doors, he was abusive and controlling towards his wife, Abril. He would often post on social media about how much he loved her, but in reality, he was constantly accusing her of cheating and even hired a private investigator to gather evidence. Despite his successful career, which included becoming the director of e-commerce at a multinational company, his marriage was deteriorating. The tension between him and Abril became unbearable, and after a trip to Monterrey to celebrate Christmas with her family, she realized she couldn't stay in the marriage any longer. During the trip, Juan's anger boiled over, and he physically attacked Abril, grabbing her by the neck and strangling her. He had received a photo from the private investigator of Abril with a male colleague, which he mistakenly believed was her lover. In reality, the man was just a coworker. Abril decided not to engage with Juan's accusations and instead filed for divorce on January 4, 2019. They had already separated and planned to inform their children about their impending divorce. However, the situation took a violent turn one early morning. Abril was asleep when she immediately filed a police report against her husband. The authorities sided with her, granting her custody of their 2 children and ordering Juan to pay 6,000 Mexican pesos, approximately $1,350, in monthly alimony. However, this amount was deemed insufficient to cover the costs of raising their 2 minors. After overcoming her initial fear and financial struggles, Abril began a new chapter in her life, driven by her determination to create a better future for her children. She relocated to Monterrey with her kids, where she attended Juan Carlos' trial and filed for divorce. Reflecting on her traumatic experience and the abuse she suffered, Abril reevaluated her life. She joined a Christian organization that supported families and started working as a divorce counselor. Her ultimate goal was to establish a support system for women who had endured similar abuse, just as she had. As Abril worked towards rebuilding her life, the court proceedings against Juan Carlos continued. 9 months after the attack, Juan was formally charged with attempted murder. The case was then brought to court, where Judge Federico Mask ordered Juan's informal arrest. Consequently, Juan was incarcerated for several weeks. Juan appealed the verdict, and on November 3, 2019, Judge Hector Jimenez reviewed the case. He found the hospital photographs and Abril's testimony, along with that of her son, insufficient to prove Juan's guilt. The judge also believed that if Juan had intended to kill Abril, he would have done so. Additionally, he considered the baseball bat used in the attack to be a blunt object, rather than a deadly weapon. As a result, the charges were downgraded, and the preliminary arrest was cancelled. With only a few hearings remaining, the outcome of the case was uncertain, causing Abril and her loved one significant anxiety and frustration. In a desperate attempt to have her concerns heard, Abril wrote to the judge, expressing her fears for her life and pleading for him to consider the threat Juan posed. However, her letter was ignored. Juan then began a custody battle for their children. Abril was forced to leave Monterrey and travel to Mexico City for the remaining hearings. She also had to subject her children to psychological evaluations, as Juan had claimed in his lawsuit that Abril had manipulated them into rejecting him. A week before a critical court hearing, Abril sat down with her 3 children to express her love and wishes for their future. She encouraged them to chase their dreams and find the strength to forgive their father. This conversation seemed like a farewell, as if Abril sensed that it might be her last opportunity to reassure her children of her love. On November 25, 2019, Abril followed her ex-husband's instructions to avoid potential legal issues that could have led to her separation from her children. She traveled to Mexico City, coincidentally on the same day that thousands of women marched in the streets to commemorate the International Day Against Gender-Based Violence on March 19, 2021. The court reclassified a case involving violence against Abril, which occurred in January 2019, as attempted murder. This decision was made after Abril's relatives and the prosecutor filed several petitions for judicial review, ultimately leading to the cancellation of the original decision. 2 months later, on May 23, the remaining suspects in Abril's murder case were apprehended, including 3 women and 1 man. The investigation resulted in the issuance of 3 search warrants and 8 arrest warrants. During the first search, 48-year-old Amanda Vicente Rodriguez was taken into custody. A series of arrests were made in connection with a recent crime. In the Jardín de Morelos colony, 34-year-old Mabel Montelier Morena and 48-year-old Garcia Alicia Flores Valdez were taken into custody, and their mobile phones were seized. Another arrest was made in the Alvar Aragon colony in Mexico City, where 50-year-old Isa Jalil Castillo, also known as Aguirre or Alvar's godmother, was detained. At the same time, 9 gang members were apprehended, with 7 of them allegedly linked to the Abril case. However, one suspect, Juan Carlos, remained at large, prompting authorities to reissue a warrant for his arrest. General Prosecutor Ernesto Godoy explained that the initial warrant was for attempted murder, while the new one was for the actual killing of a woman. Despite efforts to locate Juan, he remained elusive. In a surprising turn of events, a man named Rolf, also known as El Chalón, contacted the authorities and claimed to have information about the case. During questioning, he revealed that he was the one who had actually pulled the trigger and taken Abril's life. The perpetrator, Rodolfo Daniel Bendis, eventually pleaded guilty to the crime. He claimed that Juan Carlos had promised to pay him $10,000 to carry out the crime. According to Bendis, Juan Carlos had contacted him while he was in pre-trial detention and provided him with the address of Abril in Mexico City. Juan Carlos allegedly instructed Bendis to spy on Abril and provided written instructions on how to commit the crime. He also promised to provide Bendis with a gun in Monterrey. However, when Bendis arrived in Monterrey, no one contacted him, and he did not receive the gun. He returned to Mexico City and did not hear from Juan Carlos again until after his release from prison. Upon his release, Juan Carlos contacted Bendis again and informed him that the plan had changed. He now wanted Abril to be killed in Mexico City, as he had managed to lure her there. The case was divided into multiple hearings due to the complexity of the judicial system. The first trial began in August 2022, with Bendis and Juan Carlos as the initial defendants. During this trial, the prosecution presented 28 witness statements and 14 pieces of expert evidence. During the recent trial, a key defendant known as El Shung Galan testified about his role in planning and committing the crime of feminicide, for which he had previously pleaded guilty. On May 19, 2023, the court delivered its verdict, finding Rodolfo Danielo Baza and Juan Carlos Rodriguez guilty and sentencing them to 52 years in prison. Additionally, they were ordered to pay approximately 56,000 Mexican pesos, $30,000 US, in damages. Following the trial, the men were taken to a detention center to begin serving their sentences. However, the Abril family immediately announced their intention to appeal the verdict, as they believed the sentence was too lenient. They pointed out that Rodolfo was the one who fired the fatal shots. As for the remaining defendants, it was previously decided in October 2014 that their trials would be divided. This decision was met with an appeal from prosecutors, who argued that it would significantly delay the proceedings and result in unnecessary additional costs for the court. The tragic case of Abril continues to affect her family and the wider Mexican society, and despite the recent verdict, the trials are not yet over. After the court hearing, Abril got into a car with her children and their lawyer. She asked the lawyer to drive them to the airport for their flight back to Monterrey. En route, they stopped at an intersection, where a motorcyclist pulled up beside them. The motorcyclist, who was actually a hired assassin, shot Abril multiple times in the head. Luckily, her children, who were seated in the back, escaped serious harm. One child, who was lying down, was grazed by a bullet but suffered only minor injury. Abril was rushed to the hospital, where doctors fought to save her life. Despite their efforts, she succumbed to her injuries 6 hours later. The lawyer immediately contacted Abril's family to inform them of the tragedy. Her brother Javier traveled to Mexico City to handle the aftermath of the incident. The community suspected Juan Carlos of being involved in the crime, but the authorities took a different stance. Since the shooter's identity and motives were unknown, they couldn't classify the case as femicide and make an arrest. Instead, the case was initially treated as a murder, and the police launched an investigation to gather evidence that could potentially prove it was a femicide. Abril's friend took to social media to accuse Juan Carlos, but her account was deleted as a result. Abril's family was fearful that the perpetrator would go unpunished and sought to raise public awareness about the case through social media. The fact that Abril died on a day dedicated to fighting gender-based violence added a deeper significance to her death. The family organized protests and marches to demand justice for Abril. Following Abril's tragic death, social media erupted in outrage as people realized that she had repeatedly expressed her fear of her abuser, only to be ignored by the authorities. Her family and friends held a funeral mass at the Benito Flores Chapel in Monterrey, where dozens gathered to pay their respects and demand justice for Abril. The funeral procession then proceeded to the Pantheon Garden in Los Angeles, where Abril was laid to rest. Her case has sparked widespread attention to the issue of gender-based violence, particularly in cases where judges release men who have attacked women. Abril's ex-husband, Juan Carlos, was released from prison after appealing his sentence and was able to track Abril down to Mexico City, where he ultimately took her life. In response to Abril's case, the Mexican General Prosecutor's Office has launched an investigation into the judges who allowed Juan Carlos to be released from prison. The judges in question, Carlos Trillo Rodriguez, Federico Mosa Gonzalez, and Hector Jimenez Lopez, are being investigated for their roles in Juan Carlos' release. Additionally, representatives of the party of former Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador are calling for Judge Mosa's removal from office, citing his involvement in a previous controversial case in which he released a doctor who had disrespected a patient in a public hospital. The judge initially declined to charge Juan Carlos with femicide, instead only charging him with sexual violence, after which he was released from custody. During the public outcry surrounding the Abril case, Rafael Guerra, the president of the Supreme Court of Mexico City, suspended all judges involved in the case on November 29. Mexico City's head of government, Claudia Sheinbaum, stated that the government would investigate Abril's death. She also warned that the judges involved in the case could be held accountable for Abril's death if it was proven that Juan Carlos was responsible. Local and international media reported that Juan Carlos was released despite evidence against him. Abril's family established a non-profit organization called The Voice of Abril to provide support to victims of violence, including information, psychological assistance, and legal aid. The public demonstrations sparked by Abril's death prompted the prosecutor's office to reclassify the case against Juan Carlos, seeking to prosecute him for attempted murder, which could result in his imprisonment. After being charged, Juan Carlos took to social media to claim that he wanted justice for the crime against Abril and that the perpetrator should be punished. He also stated that he was willing to cooperate with the police, despite having a troubled marriage with Abril, and he would never have wanted her to meet such a tragic end. However, his post sparked widespread discontent among the community. His 18-year-old daughter, Ana Cecilia, publicly spoke out against her father, accusing him of physically and mentally abusing her, her siblings, and Abril over the years. She shared disturbing photos of Abril's injuries after being attacked with a baseball bat. Ana described her father as a narcissistic sociopath who allegedly bribed his way out of prison. During the ongoing investigation and protests, an arrest warrant was issued for Juan Carlos, but it was not directly related to the Abril case. Instead, it was due to him violating judicial duties. Although he was released on the condition that he would check in with the police station weekly, he failed to do so. After missing 2 court hearings, Judge Agustin Monra Gasper Canel was left with no choice but to issue the order. Juan wrote a letter claiming he feared for his life and did not want to attend the hearings, stating he and his family had received death threats since Abril's death. He believed someone would seek revenge if he appeared in court. However, the judge rejected this excuse and issued an arrest warrant, also restricting Juan from leaving the country. The investigation continued, aiming to find one who knew Abril's route to Mexico City, as he had requested to meet her. After the shocking details of the case became public, no law firm was willing to defend the suspect, Juan Carlos. Meanwhile,